You find yourself standing in the doorway of a single-room cottage in the English countryside. Sometime in the late 1200s, the year might be 1287. Though such precision matters little to the family inside, who measure time by the rhythm of seasons rather than the turning of calendar pages. The autumn evening settles like a heavy blanket over the village of Little Wickham, a place so small it barely merits mention in any lord's records, yet home to perhaps 30 souls who know each other's daily routines as intimately as they know the patterns of their own breathing. Inside this cottage, which measures no more than 20 feet square, the entire world of the Godwin family unfolds. The earthen floor, packed hard by countless feet over countless years, bears the patina of daily life dark stains where water has spilled, lighter patches worn smooth by the constant shuffle of bare feet. And in one corner, a perpetual dampness where the thatch above has grown thin with age. The walls, built of wattle and daub hazel twigs woven together and plastered with a mixture of mud, dung, and straw, lean slightly inward, as if the house itself grows weary with the years. As darkness approaches, you witness the daily transformation of this living space into a sleeping chamber. Thomas Godwin, a man whose age you might guess at 40, though the hard lines of labor make such estimates unreliable, begins the process that will occupy the next hour of his evening. He moves to the corner where the family's most valuable possession waits not, their wooden bowl, nor their iron pot, nor even the precious few tools that enable their survival, but their bed. The bed, if it can properly be called such, consists first of a rectangular wooden frame, crudely joined with wooden pegs and leather lashings. Across this frame, Thomas and his eldest son have stretched a network of rope knot, the refined hemp rope that might grace a lord's manor, but rough, hand-twisted cordage made from whatever plant fibers they could gather and prepare during the previous winter's long evenings. These ropes sag noticeably in the center, requiring Thomas to tighten them with the wooden key kept hanging on a nail driven into the wall. This nightly ritual of making the bed tight gives birth to an expression that will outlive not only Thomas, but centuries of his descendants. Upon this rope foundation lies the family's straw mattress, or pellias, as the more learned might call it, though Thomas knows no French and cares nothing for such refinements. The mattress appears as a large, lumpy sack stitched from coarse linen cloth so rough it would scrape modern skin raw, yet representing hours of careful work by Thomas's wife, Margaret. The linen itself tells a story of transformation. Flax grown in the village strips, retted in the stream during summer months, beaten and combed until the fibers submitted to human will, then spun on winter evenings by candlelight that cost precious pennies they could barely afford. But it is the contents of this mattress that demand your attention, for within its confines lies the very essence of medieval rural life. The straw, and here we must pause to understand that medieval straw encompassed more than the dried stalks of wheat or barley that modern minds might imagine represents the agricultural cycle made manifest in bedding form. Wheat straw certainly fills much of the space. Golden stalks that whispered in summer fields before the harvest reduced them to stubble. But mixed among these stalks you would find barley straw, darker and coarser, along with the hollow stems of oats that produce a particular rustling sound when disturbed. The family did not simply stuff their mattress with whatever straw lay nearest at hand. Margaret, drawing upon knowledge passed down through generations of women whose names history will never record, selected each component with the care of an apothecary mixing medicines. The wheat straw provided the bulk and basic cushioning, its hollow stems creating countless tiny air pockets that offered insulation from the cold earth below. The barley straw, being coarser, provided structure and prevented the mattress from compacting into a solid, uncomfortable mass. The oat straw, lighter and more resilient, helped the mattress retain some springiness despite the weight of the bodies it would soon support. But Margaret's knowledge extended beyond mere grain stalks. Scattered throughout the mattress, you would discover dried rushes gathered from the marshy ground near the village stream. These rushes cut at precisely the right moment in their growth cycle. Too early, and they would rot. Too late, and they would crumble. Provided additional padding, while their natural oils offered some protection against the insects that inevitably shared the family's sleeping space. Among the rushes, your fingers might encounter the dried stems of lady's bedstraw, that yellow-flowered plant that grows wild in the hedgerows and whose very name reveals its domestic purpose. Lady's bedstraw served multiple functions that demonstrate the practical wisdom of medieval households. Its pleasant, honey-like fragrance masked the earthier odors that accumulated in a mattress shared by 7 people and used every night for months at a time. More importantly, the plant's natural properties repelled fleas, those ubiquitous companions of medieval life whose bites marked every human body from birth to death. The women of the village also whispered that lady's bedstraw eased the pains of childbirth. And given that Margaret had borne 8 children, 5 of whom survived their first years, this quality held particular significance in the Godwin household. As you observe the family's preparations for sleep, you notice other botanical additions to their mattress. Dried bracken fronds, gathered from the forest clearings, provide additional bulk, while their slight astringency helps preserve the other plant materials. Heather, collected from the moors during its flowering season, contributes a faint purple fragrance, and its woody stems offer structural support. In years when the harvest proved particularly poor, Margaret might supplement the mattress filling with dried leaves, beech leaves being preferred for their durability and cleanliness, though oak, ash, and even birch leaves might serve in desperate times. The construction of this mattress represents months of preparation, beginning with the previous year's harvest. After the grain had been threshed and winnowed, the straw required careful sorting. Damaged stalks, those broken or rotted, were discarded or reserved for animal bedding. The best straw, straight, golden, free from mold or insect damage, was bundled and stored in the cottage's single upper loft, where it would remain dry throughout the winter months. Come spring, Margaret would begin the careful process of preparing the New Year's bedding. First, she washed the old mattress casing, a task that consumed an entire day and required hauling countless buckets of water from the village well. The linen, already rough from months of use, required vigorous scrubbing with soap made from animal fat and wood asha, caustic mixture that left Margaret's hands raw and cracked. While the casing dried in whatever sunshine could be found, she emptied the old straw, sorting through it carefully. Some of the previous year's filling, if still sweet and unbroken, might be saved and mixed with the new. The rest would join the compost heap or feed the family's single pig. Nothing in a medieval household being wasted if it could serve any useful purpose. The restuffing of the mattress became a family endeavor, with even the youngest children old enough to walk participating in the process. Thomas would bring down bundles of the stored straw, while Margaret sorted through each handful, removing any stalks that had attracted mice or shown signs of decay. The children gathered the rushes and bedstraw, their small fingers better suited to the delicate work of preparing these aromatic additions. The older boys helped stuff the mattress, learning through participation the skills they would need when they established their own households. The timing of this annual mattress renewal followed the agricultural calendar with the precision of a church ritual. It typically occurred in late summer, after the grain harvest, but before the intense labor of preparing for winter. The family needed their bedding to be fresh and full as the cold months approached, when they would spend as many as 14 hours of each day in sleep, waiting for dawn to release them back into the world of productive labor. As Thomas completes his evening adjustment of the rope bed frame, you can see that this simple piece of furniture represents far more than a place to rest. It embodies the collective labor of the family, the father's skill in woodworking and rope making, the mother's expertise in textile production and botanical knowledge, the children's contribution to gathering and preparing materials. The bed stands as a testament to the interconnectedness of medieval life, where survival depended not on individual achievement, but on the seamless cooperation of every family member. But as the family prepares to retire for the night, you realize that the physical construction of their sleeping arrangement represents only the beginning of the night's story. For in medieval England, sleep itself followed patterns as structured and purposeful as the daylight hours. And the straw bed you now observe will soon become the stage for a drama of rest and waking that urban dwellers would find utterly foreign. The question that hangs in the darkening air is not simply how they slept, but how they transformed the act of sleep into a social experience that bound the family together while simultaneously connecting them to the larger rhythms of their agricultural world. The moment arrives when the Godwin family begins their transformation from active participants in the daytime world to inhabitants of the night realm. And you find yourself witness to a process as ritualized and meaningful as any church ceremony. Margaret moves first, her movements deliberate and practiced as she extinguishes the single rush lamp that has provided the cottage's only illumination since sunset. The flame dies with a small hiss, plunging the room into a darkness so complete that your modern eyes, accustomed to the ambient glow of electric lighting, find it almost overwhelming. Yet for the Godwin family, this darkness represents not an ending, but a beginning, the commencement of their first sleep. The concept of first sleep requires explanation. For in 1287, the idea that night should be divided into two distinct periods of slumber governs the sleeping patterns of virtually everyone in the pre-industrial world. Thomas, Margaret, and their 5 surviving children do not expect to sleep through the night in the manner that modern people consider normal. Instead, they anticipate a pattern that will see them sleep for approximately 3 hours, wake naturally, for an hour or two of quiet activity, then return to sleep until dawn. As the family approaches their shared straw bed, the social choreography of medieval sleep begins to unfold. This choreography, passed down through generations and refined by necessity, determines not only where each family member will rest, but how they will position themselves to maximize warmth, minimize disruption, and observe the social hierarchies that govern even their most intimate moments. Thomas and Margaret, as the adult couple, claim the center of the beta position that reflects both their parental authority and the practical necessity of their role as the family's primary heat sources. Their central placement allows them to monitor and tend to their children throughout the night while ensuring that the coldest positions, those nearest the edges of the bed, are occupied by the family members most capable of generating and retaining body heat. To Margaret's right, nearest the wall, the family's 3 daughters arrange themselves in strict age order. Mary, the eldest at 14, closest to her mother. Alice, age 11, in the middle. And little Joan, barely 6 years old, pressed against the relative warmth of the cottage's interior wall. This arrangement serves multiple practical purposes. Mary, as the eldest daughter, can assist her mother with any nighttime needs that might arise tending to a sick child, adding fuel to the dying fire, or helping with the intimate necessities that large families sharing small spaces must manage. With careful discretion, Alice, at the intermediate age, provides a buffer between her mother and youngest sister while learning through proximity the responsibilities she will soon assume. Little Joan, the most vulnerable to cold and most likely to disturb others with her restless sleeping, benefits from the wall's slight insulation and her sister's body heat. On Thomas's left side, the family's 2 surviving sons position themselves, with equal attention to age and practical considerations. Young Thomas, age 12, and already showing the promise of his father's strong frame, lies nearest to the adult Thomas, while 8-year-old Geoffrey occupies the bed's outer edge. This arrangement reflects the boys' future roles as inheritors of their father's agricultural knowledge and responsibilities. Young Thomas's proximity to his father facilitates the quiet conversations that will occur during the night's waking period, when fathers traditionally shared with their eldest sons the accumulated wisdom of farming, weather prediction, and the subtle politics of village life. The physical act of 7 people arranging themselves on a straw mattress, perhaps 6 feet wide and 7 feet long, requires a coordination that speaks to years of practice. Each family member knows precisely how much space they can claim, how to position their bodies to avoid elbowing or kicking their bedmates, and how to breathe quietly to avoid disturbing others. The straw beneath them compresses under their combined weight, the individual stalks settling and redistributing to accommodate the familiar contours of the bodies they have supported for months. You can hear the characteristic sounds of a straw bed accepting its nightly burden, the whisper of dried grass stems sliding against each other, the faint crackle of lady's bed straw releasing its honey-scented oils under pressure, the deeper rustle of rushes and bracken fronds finding new positions. Within the mattress's linen casing, these sounds, barely audible, yet ever present, form part of the acoustic landscape of medieval sleep natural. Organic sounds that connect the sleepers to the agricultural world that sustains their lives. The family's single blanket, woven from wool provided by their lord's sheep and prepared by Margaret's own hands, covers all 7 bodies with the carefully calculated efficiency that poverty demands. This blanket, thick and scratchy, but capable of retaining the warmth generated by multiple bodies, represents another example of medieval practical wisdom. Its weave incorporates deliberate irregularities, thick sections alternating with thinner areas that allow for both insulation and breathability. The lanolin remaining in the wool provides natural water resistance, crucial in a cottage where dampness seeps through thatch and walls during England's frequent rains. Beneath this communal covering, each family member wears their day clothes, for the concept of special sleeping garments belongs to a world of luxury far removed from peasant life. Thomas wears his linen undertunic and woolen overtunic, the same garments that have clothed him through the day's labor in the fields. Margaret's simple wool dress, carefully darned and redarned where wear threatens to create holes, serves as her nightgown just as it served as her working dress. The children wear smaller versions of their parents' clothing linen, undergarments topped with wool. It's cloth showing the careful economies of a household where every thread carries value. As the family settles into their first sleep. Their positioning on the straw mattress reflects not only practical considerations, but also the complex web of relationships that define medieval family life. The parents' central position allows them to maintain physical contact throughout the night, not romantic contact. For such intimacies in a bed shared with children require careful timing and discreet management, the constant, reassuring touch that reinforces their marital bond and parental responsibilities. The children, arranged by age and gender, learn through nightly experience the social hierarchies and responsibilities that will govern their adult lives. Mary, pressed between her mother and younger sister, absorbs through proximity the skills of household management and childcare that will define her future role as a wife and mother. Young Thomas, positioned next to his father, receives the subtle lessons in masculine authority and agricultural knowledge that will shape his eventual inheritance of the family's tenancy. Even the youngest children, Geoffrey and Joan, learn through the nightly ritual their places in the family structure and the acute behaviors expected of their age and gender. The straw beneath them serves as more than mere cushioning. It becomes a medium for the complex negotiations of shared sleep. The mattress's give and resilience allow the family members to find positions that minimize disruption to their bedmates while accommodating the natural movements of sleep. The botanical additions ladies' bedstraw rushes. Dried herbs release their fragrances gradually throughout the night, creating an olfactory environment that masks the inevitable odors of 7 unwashed bodies while providing the slight medicinal benefits that medieval people valued. After approximately 3 hours of sleep, the family begins to stir naturally. entering what they know as the watch period that divides their night into two segments. This awakening occurs not because of external disturbances, but because of internal biological rhythms that pre-industrial humans followed as naturally as they followed the seasons. The transition from first sleep to waking happens gradually, with individual family members emerging from slumber over the course of several minutes rather than jolting awake simultaneously. Margaret typically wakes first. Her maternal instincts, attuned to the subtle changes in her children's breathing that signal their movement toward consciousness. She remains still for several minutes, listening to the night sounds that penetrate their cottage, the distant lowing of cattle in the Lord's fields, the rustle of small animals in the thatch above, the occasional call of a night bird from the forest beyond the village. These sounds provide her with information about the weather, the time of night, and the general state of the world beyond their walls. Thomas wakes next, his farmer's intuition telling him whether the night progresses normally or whether some disturbance threatens their livestock or crops. In a world where the family's survival depends entirely on their ability to produce food from a small plot of land, nighttime vigilance represents a necessity rather than neurosis. A storm approaching from the west might require immediate action to secure tools or protect vulnerable plants. The sound of foxes or wolves might signal threats to their chickens or pig. Even the direction and intensity of the wind carries information about tomorrow's weather and the tasks. It will demand that children wake more gradually, their young bodies requiring longer to transition from sleep to full consciousness. Mary, as the eldest daughter, typically emerges from sleep shortly after her parents, while the younger children may remain in a drowsy, half-aware state throughout much of the watch period. This gradual awakening serves the family's needs perfectly, allowing the adults to engage in the night's important activities without the constant supervision that fully wakeful small children would require. During this watch period, the straw bed becomes the stage for some of the most intimate and meaningful interactions of medieval family life. Thomas and Margaret engage in quiet conversation, discussing the day's events, planning tomorrow's activities, and sharing observations about their children's development and behavior. These conversations, conducted in whispers that preserve the drowsy peace of the younger family members, represent the couple's primary opportunity for private communication in a life that offers virtually no privacy during daylight hours. But perhaps the most significant question emerges from this examination of the family's nighttime arrangements. How did 7 people sharing a single straw mattress navigate the complex physical and social demands of their sleeping arrangement? What does their ability to do so reveal about the nature of human adaptability and family cohesion in pre-modern societies? The watch period unfolds as a world unto itself, governed by rhythms and customs as complex as those that structure the daylight hours. You observe the Godwin family navigating this interval between sleeps with the practiced ease of people who have transformed necessity into ritual, privacy into intimacy, and constraint into opportunity. The straw bed, which during their first sleep served primarily as a resting place, now becomes the center of the family's most meaningful nocturnal activities. In the darkness so complete that even familiar objects become invisible. Beyond arm's reach, Thomas and Margaret begin the quiet conversations that represent the true heart of their marriage. These whispered exchanges, conducted with an intimacy impossible during the day's constant labor and social obligations, allow them to share thoughts, concerns, and decisions that will shape their family's future. Margaret speaks of her observations about Alice's health, noting a cough that has persisted longer than usual and wondering whether they should seek advice from the village wise woman. Thomas shares his concerns about the wheat in the north field, where the stalks seem less robust than in previous years, and they discuss whether different planting strategies might improve next year's yield. Their conversation extends beyond Immediate practical matters to touch on the deeper questions that occupy the minds of people whose lives balance constantly on the edge of survival. They speak of young Mary's approaching marriageable age and the delicate negotiations that will be required to secure her a suitable husband from within their small community. The straw beneath them rustles softly as Margaret shifts position to better see her husband's shadowed face. And in that rustle lies the sound of generations of similar conversations. Countless medieval couples planning and worrying and hoping. In the darkness of shared beds. The children, ranging from fully awake to drowsily aware, participate in the watch period according to their ages and temperaments. Young Thomas, now 12 and increasingly conscious of his approaching manhood, listens intently as his father shares observations about farming techniques, weather patterns, and the subtle social dynamics of village life. These nocturnal lessons represent a crucial component of his education, not the formal schooling available only to the wealthy, but the practical wisdom that will determine his success as an adult farmer and family provider. The transfer of knowledge during these quiet hours takes forms that would be impossible during the day's intense labor. Thomas the Elder speaks of reading natural signs, how the behavior of birds indicates weather changes, how the condition of soil reveals what crops will thrive, how the political moods of their lord and his reeve affect the daily lives of peasant families. He shares stories of previous year's harvests, describing techniques that succeeded and strategies that failed, building in his son's mind a catalog of agricultural wisdom that no written text could capture. Mary, the eldest daughter, receives similar instruction from her mother, though the knowledge passed to her focuses on the complex skills of household management that will define her adult role. Margaret speaks quietly of the timing of various domestic tasks when to begin preparing winter stores, how to recognize the signs that indicate preserved foods are spoiling, which herbs provide the most effective remedies for common ailments. She shares the subtle social knowledge that governs women's lives in their village, which neighbors can be trusted with confidences, how to navigate the complex hierarchies among the Lord's household servants, when to assert opinions and when to remain diplomatically silent. The younger children, Alice and Geoffrey and little Joan, drift in and out of full consciousness during these conversations, absorbing fragments of adult knowledge in the unself-conscious way that characterizes childhood learning. They hear their parents discussing family decisions, community events, and practical concerns, gradually building their understanding of the adult world they will eventually enter. The warmth and security of the shared bed, combined with the quiet intimacy of their parents' voices, creates an environment where learning occurs naturally, and without the formal structure that characterizes other forms of education. But the watch period encompasses more than conversation and instruction. Medieval people understood that the hours between first and second sleep provided the optimal time for conception, and Thomas and Margaret, like couples throughout their world, reserved their most intimate physical expressions for these quiet hours. The management of marital intimacy in a bed shared with children required delicate choreography and mutual understanding. But medieval families developed strategies that preserved both parental privacy and children's innocence. The straw mattress itself contributed to this delicate balance. Its natural rustling provided acoustic camouflage for the subtle movements of intimate contact, while its yielding surface allowed for position changes that could be attributed to normal sleep adjustments. The botanical additions to the mattress, particularly the lady's bed straw, with its reputation for easing childbirth, served symbolic as well as practical purposes, connecting the act of conception to the agricultural fertility that governed every aspect of peasant life. Margaret and Thomas's relationship during these nocturnal hours reflects the complex nature of medieval marriage among the peasant class. Their union, likely arranged by their parents according to practical considerations of land tenure and economic necessity, has evolved over 15 years into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared hardship, and genuine affection. The watch period conversations reveal a couple who consult each other on important decisions, share their fears and hopes, and work together to provide for their children's welfare despite the constant pressures of poverty and uncertainty. The physical challenges of sharing a straw bed with 5 children require constant adaptation and compromise. Each family member has learned to sleep in positions that minimize disruption to their bedmates, to muffle coughs and other involuntary sounds, and to navigate the inevitable needs for nighttime relief without disturbing the entire household. The straw mattress, compressed under the weight of 7 bodies, develops familiar contours that accommodate each sleeper's preferred position while maintaining enough resilience to support their combined weight throughout the night. Young Thomas, pressed against his father's side, absorbs not only verbal instruction, but also the physical lessons of masculine behavior. He learns to control his movements, to breathe quietly, to position his growing body in ways that respect the space constraints of the shared bed. These lessons in physical self-discipline will serve him well in his future life, whether he remains in the family cottage or eventually establishes his own household. Mary faces similar challenges as she navigates the transition from childhood to young womanhood within the intimate confines of the family bed. Her position between her mother and younger sister requires her to balance her own comfort with her responsibility for Joan's welfare, while her developing body demands increasing awareness of appropriate positioning and movement. Margaret guides her daughter through these challenges with subtle suggestions and gentle corrections, preparing her for the day when she will share a bed with her own husband and children. The practical aspects of maintaining hygiene and cleanliness in a shared straw bed require constant attention and ingenuity. The botanical additions to the mattress serve partially to address these concerns, with ladies' bed straw providing natural deodorizing properties and various herbs offering mild antiseptic benefits. Margaret changes the bed linens, the single rough sheet that separates the family's bodies from direct contact with the straws, frequently as their limited supply of cloth allows, typically washing and drying the sheet during favorable weather, while the family uses their spare covering. The maintenance of the straw mattress itself represents an ongoing challenge that reflects the broader struggles of medieval domestic life. The constant pressure of multiple bodies gradually compresses the straw, reducing its insulating properties and comfort. Margaret and Thomas must periodically redistribute the mattress filling, working fresh straw into areas that have become too compacted while removing stalks that have broken down or begun to decay. This maintenance typically occurs during the warmer months, when the family can temporarily relocate their sleeping arrangements while the mattress undergoes repair. As the watch period draws toward its close, the family begins the gradual transition toward their second sleep. This transition requires the same careful coordination that characterized their evening preparations, with each family member settling back into their designated positions, while adjusting for the slight changes that have occurred during their hours of wakefulness. The straw beneath them rustles one final time as 7 bodies seek comfortable positions for the remainder of the night. The second sleep, which will last from approximately 1 or 2 in the morning until dawn, typically proves deeper and more restful than the first sleep. Having addressed their most pressing concerns and completed their nighttime activities, the family members surrender more completely to unconsciousness, their bodies pressed together in the warmth and security of their shared straw bed. But as you observe this medieval family settling into their second sleep, a profound question emerges about the nature of rest itself. In our modern world of private bedrooms and individual mattresses, have we gained comfort at the cost of the deep family intimacy and security that characterized medieval sleep? And what does the Godwin family's ability to find peace and restoration in their crowded straw bed reveal about human adaptability and the true meaning of home? The morning mist rises from the Rappahannock River as you stand at the edge of William Hartwell's plantation in colonial Virginia, watching the first light of September 1754 illuminate. A scene that has remained essentially unchanged for generations. The tobacco fields stretch toward the horizon in neat, precise rows, their broad leaves now yellowing as harvest time approaches, while closer to the main house, smaller plots devoted to subsistence crops corn, wheat, barley, and oats await. The cutting that will transform them from living plants, heaped to the raw materials for another year's survival. William Hartwell owns 300 acres of Virginia Piedmont, making him neither wealthy planter nor struggling yeoman farmer, but rather a representative of that solid middle class of colonial landowners who formed the backbone of 18th century American agriculture. His brick house, built by his own hands with help from neighboring farmers, stands 2 stories tall, with 4 rooms and a root cellar, substantial dwelling by colonial standards, yet modest enough that every square foot serves multiple purposes throughout the seasonal cycle of rural life. Today marks the beginning of what the Hartwell family knows as tick-making time, that crucial annual ritual when the year's sleeping arrangements receive their foundation in the form of fresh straw, mattresses, or ticks as they are properly called in colonial America. The timing of this activity coordinates precisely with the grain harvest. For the straw that will fill the family's mattresses represents not a byproduct of food production, but a valuable resource carefully planned for and preserved throughout the growing season. William's wife, Sarah, has spent the past week preparing for today's work with the same meticulous attention she devotes to all domestic tasks that determine her family's comfort and health. At 35, she bears the weathered hands and sun-darkened complexion of a woman who has spent 20 years managing a colonial household. Yet her movements retain the efficiency and purpose that mark successful frontier wives. Her knowledge encompasses not only the practical skills of cooking, cleaning, and childcare, but the more specialized arts of textile production, herbal medicine, and the complex logistics of seasonal food preservation. The Hartwell family's sleeping arrangements reflect both their social position and the practical constraints of colonial domestic architecture. William and Sarah occupied the largest bedroom, furnished with a substantial rope bed frame that William constructed during their first winter of marriage. Their 3 surviving children, 15-year-old Benjamin, 12-year-old Martha, and 8-year-old Samuel, share the second bedroom, while the hired man, Jakob, a German immigrant working to pay off his passage debt, sleeps in the loft above. The kitchen. Each of these sleeping spaces requires its own straw tick, and each tick demands specific types and qualities of straw depending on the age, size, and social position of its intended occupants. The master bedroom tick, measuring 6 feet by 7 feet, will consume the largest quantity of the finest materials. Carefully selected wheat straw supplemented with softer oat straw and aromatic additions gathered throughout the summer months. The children's ticks, proportioned to their smaller bodies and lower status within the household hierarchy, will utilize good quality materials, but in combinations that emphasize durability over luxury. Jakob's tick, befitting his position as temporary household member, will consist primarily of serviceable wheat straw with minimal additions. The process of making these annual ticks begins not on this September morning, but in the previous autumn, when Sarah began planning and preparing the materials that today's work will require. The linen cloth that forms the ticks themselves represents months of labor, starting with the flax planted in a dedicated plot near the kitchen garden. Sarah processed this flax through the lengthy sequence of retting, breaking, scutching, and hackling that transforms the raw plant fibers into threads suitable for weaving. The thread itself required countless evening hours of spinning, while the weaving of the cloth demanded access to a neighbor's loom and careful coordination with other women's textile projects. But Sarah's preparation extended far beyond the production of linen ticking. Throughout the growing season, she gathered and dried the botanical additions that would transform her family's straw ticks from simple bedding into sources of comfort, health, and sensory pleasure. Ladies' bed straw, collected during its July flowering, now hangs in carefully labeled bundles in the kitchen loft. Its honey-sweet fragrance preserved for mixing with the mattress straw. Lavender grown in her herb garden and harvested at the peak of its aromatic potency awaits similar use. Pennyroyal, valued for its ability to repel fleas and other insects, fills a dedicated storage basket, while various other herbs stand for its preservation properties. Chamomile for its soothing. Effects Mint for its fresh scent represent Sarah's accumulated knowledge of botanical bedding enhancement. The straw itself, which casual observers might dismiss as agricultural waste, embodies weeks of careful selection and preparation. Not all straw suits the demanding requirements of mattress construction. The stalks must be relatively unbroken, free from mold or insect damage, and cut at precisely the right stage of plant maturity to ensure optimal durability and comfort. Sarah directed the cutting and handling of this straw personally, walking the grain fields with William to identify the portions best suited for bedding rather than animal feed or thatching material. Wheat straw forms the foundation of colonial tick construction because of its ideal combination of strength, resilience, and availability. The hollow stems provide excellent insulation properties while maintaining enough structural integrity to support human weight without immediately collapsing into uncomfortable lumps. But wheat straw alone creates a sleeping surface that colonial sleepers considered excessively firm and noisy, prompting the careful additions that distinguish comfortable ticks from mere sacks of grain refuse. Oat straw, softer and more flexible than wheat, provides the crucial element of cushioning that makes long nights on straw ticks bearable. The oat stalks compress more readily under body weight, creating pockets and contours that accommodate the natural curves of sleeping bodies. However, oat straw alone lacks the structural strength to maintain its shape over months of use, explaining why colonial tick makers combined it with wheat straw in carefully calibrated proportions. Barley straw, when available, offers properties intermediate between wheat and oat straw. Its slightly rough texture helps prevent the mattress contents from shifting excessively, while its natural oils provide some protection against insects and moisture. Colonial households fortunate enough to have both wheat and barley growing on their land valued barley straw, particularly for its contribution to mattress longevity, though its relative scarcity often limited its use to the most important beds. In the household, as you observe Sarah's preparations on this September morning, you witness the culmination of a year's worth of planning and labor. She has spread the new linen ticking on the kitchen table. Its rough weave testimony to countless hours of domestic industry. The fabric, though coarse by modern standards, represents the finest cloth the Hartwell household can produce, woven tight enough to contain the smallest straw fragments, while remaining permeable enough to allow air circulation through the mattress. Contents: the construction of a colonial straw tick requires specific techniques passed down through generations of housewives, each refinement representing hard-won knowledge about the relationship between materials, construction methods, and sleeping comfort. Sarah begins by examining each piece of ticking for flaws, loose threads that might allow straw to escape, thin spots that could tear under the stress of stuffing, or irregularities in the weave that might create uncomfortable pressure points. Against sleeping bodies, the sewing of the tick itself demands both strength and precision. Sarah uses linen thread, spun from the same flax that produced the ticking fabric, because cotton thread, while softer and easier to work with, lacks the durability required for mattress construction. Her stitches must be small enough to prevent straw leakage, yet strong enough to withstand the constant stress of bodies pressing against the mattress surface. The seams receive double stitching along the sides and bottom, while the top edge remains partially open to allow for the stuffing process. Benjamin, the eldest son, assists his mother with tasks appropriate to his age and gender. At 15, he possesses the physical strength necessary for handling the large quantities of straw that will fill the family's ticks. but lacks the fine motor skills and patience required for the delicate work of sewing and botanical arrangement. His responsibilities include bringing the prepared straw from the barn, sorting through it for damaged pieces, and helping to pack the finished ticks to appropriate density. Martha, at 12, occupies the critical transitional age where she can contribute meaningfully to her mother's work while learning the domestic skills that will define her adult life. She assists with the sewing, her small fingers well suited to the precise work of mattress construction, while simultaneously absorbing the accumulated wisdom of colonial housekeeping that Sarah shares throughout the day's labor. The knowledge Martha gains today about straw selection, botanical additions, construction techniques, and seasonal timing will serve her throughout her adult life as she manages her own household. Young Samuel, at 8, participates according to his capabilities, gathering herbs from the garden, sorting straw pieces by size and quality, and learning through observation the complex processes that ensure his family's comfort. His presence allows Sarah to begin his education in the practical arts of colonial life while maintaining the family cooperation that such large domestic projects require. The work begins in earnest as the morning sun climbs higher, burning away the river mist and warming the September air to the perfect temperature for outdoor labor. Sarah and her family gather in the kitchen yard, where the prepared materials await their transformation into the year's bedding. The scene that unfolds represents one of those moments when colonial domestic life reveals its true complexity. Not the simple rustic existence that popular imagination often envisions, but a sophisticated system of knowledge, skill, and cooperation that enabled European families to establish successful households in the challenging environment of 18th century America. The question that emerges as you observe this colonial family beginning their annual tick-making process is not simply how they constructed their mattresses, but how this single domestic ritual connected them to the larger rhythms of agricultural life, seasonal change, and community cooperation that defined existence in colonial Virginia. For in the seemingly simple act of stuffing straw into linen sacks lies a complex web of relationships between human needs, natural resources, and the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who learned to find comfort and rest in a world where survival depended entirely on one's ability to work harmoniously with the natural environment. The morning progresses with the methodical pace that characterizes all significant colonial domestic undertakings. As Sarah Hartwell orchestrates the complex process of transforming raw materials into finished bedding, you observe her moving between the various stations she has established in the kitchen yard. The sorting area, where Benjamin separates wheat straw from oat straw. The blending station, where Martha measures botanical additives, and the stuffing area where the family will work together to fill each completed tick casing. The first tick to receive attention belongs to Jacob, the hired man whose bed occupies the kitchen loft. While his social position within the household places him below the family members in terms of sleeping comfort, Sarah's sense of Christian duty and practical household management demands that his bedding meet basic standards of cleanliness and adequacy. A poorly rested hired man cannot perform the physical labor that the farm requires, and an uncomfortable sleeping arrangement might encourage Jacob to seek employment elsewhere at a time when reliable workers remain scarce in colonial Virginia. Jacob's tick receives a foundation of good quality wheat straw, carefully cleaned and sorted to remove broken pieces and foreign matter. Sarah adds a modest quantity of oat straw for basic cushioning, along with a handful of pennyroyal to discourage fleas and other insects that might otherwise multiply in the warm confines of the kitchen loft. The botanical additions remain minimal enough to address practical concerns about hygiene and pest control, but not enough to suggest that Jacob's comfort takes precedence over the family's needs. The process of stuffing Jacob's tick demonstrates the physical demands of bedding construction. Benjamin and Martha work together to hold the tick casing open while Sarah feeds measured quantities of straw into the opening. The straw must be packed firmly enough to provide support for a sleeping body, yet loosely enough to maintain the air pockets that provide insulation and cushioning. Too loose, and the tick will compress into uncomfortable lumps within weeks of use. Too tight, and the sleeping surface becomes as hard and unyielding as the floor itself. Sarah's experience allows her to judge the proper density by feel. Pressing her hands into the partially filled tick to assess its firmness and resilience. She adjusts the mixture of wheat and oat straw as the stuffing progresses, adding more wheat straw to areas that will support the heaviest parts of Jakob's body, his hips and shoulders, while using more oat straw in areas where softer support proves more appropriate. This customization of mattress construction represents sophisticated knowledge of human anatomy and sleeping comfort that colonial housewives developed through years of practical experience. The completion of Jakob's tick requires approximately 2 hours, including the final sewing that seals the opening and the vigorous shaking and manipulation that distributes the straw evenly throughout the casing. The finished product measures approximately 5 feet by 6 feet, appropriate for Jakob's single sleeping arrangement, and weighs nearly 40 pounds when properly stuffed. Sarah tests a completed tick by pressing various portions of its surface, checking for thin spots or lumps that might cause discomfort, and making minor adjustments by shifting the internal straw through manipulation of the outer casing. With Jakob's tick completed and set aside for final inspection, the family turns their attention to the children's bedding. The 3 young Hartwells share a bedroom, but each possesses an individual tick sized appropriately for their age and body size. This arrangement reflects both the family's relative prosperity and Sarah's understanding of the relationship between good sleep and children's health and development. Benjamin's tick, befitting his status as eldest son and approaching adult, receives construction nearly equal to his parents' bedding. The wheat straw foundation incorporates the finest stalks Sarah has reserved, while the oat straw addition provides substantial cushioning for his growing body. Sarah adds dried chamomile flowers, valued for their sleep-promoting properties, along with a generous portion of ladies' bed straw, whose sweet fragrance will make the long winter nights more pleasant. Lavender from the garden contributes both scent and its reputed calming effects, while a small quantity of tansy provides natural preservation that will help the tick maintain its freshness throughout the coming year. The construction of Benjamin's tick becomes an opportunity for extended instruction in the domestic arts that will serve him when he establishes his own household. While colonial gender roles typically assigned bedding construction to women, practical frontier life demanded that all family members understand basic domestic skills. Sarah explains to Benjamin the reasoning behind her material choices, the importance of proper stuffing density, and the seasonal cycle of tick replacement that ensures year-round sleeping comfort. Martha's tick receives similar attention, though the botanical additions reflect her mother's consideration of specifically feminine needs and preferences, along with the standard herbs for freshness and pest control. Sarah includes a small quantity of red clover. It's traditionally valued for its benefits to women's health, and additional chamomile for its gentle, soothing properties. The stuffing mixture incorporates a higher proportion of oat straw, creating a softer sleeping surface that Sarah considers more appropriate for her daughter's developing body. Young Samuel's tick, appropriate for an 8-year-old boy, receives a foundation of wheat straw supplemented with enough oat straw to provide basic comfort. The botanical additions focus primarily on practical concerns: pennyroyal for insect control and a small amount of chamomile to encourage restful sleep. Sarah uses this opportunity to begin Samuel's education in domestic management, explaining how the materials work together to create comfortable bedding, and why the annual replacement of tick contents ensures family health and comfort. The midday meal interrupts the tick-making process, providing an opportunity for the family to rest and refresh themselves while discussing the tick tea sticks kamya. While discussing the afternoon's remaining tasks, Sarah has prepared a substantial meal: cornbread, preserved meat, vegetables from the garden, and cider from the previous year's apple harvest that will sustain the family through the afternoon's continued labor. The meal also serves a social function, bringing the family together for conversation and mutual encouragement during a day of intensive cooperative work. The afternoon's primary task involves the construction of the master bedroom tick, the largest and most complex of the family's bedding requirements. This tick will serve William and Sarah throughout the coming year, supporting their bodies through hundreds of nights of sleep while accommodating the various uses that the master bed serves in colonial households, not only sleeping, but also the site of intimate marital relations, childbirth, illness, recovery, and the private conversations that married couples require for maintaining their partnerships. The construction of the master tick demands the finest materials and most careful workmanship that the family can provide. Sarah has reserved the best wheat straw straight, golden stalks cut at the optimal stage of ripeness and carefully preserved throughout the summer months. The oat straw edition comes from the choicest portions of the oat harvest, selected for its softness and resilience. The botanical additions represent a sophisticated blend of herbs chosen for their complementary trove properties: ladies' bed straw for fragrance and flea control, lavender for its calming and romantic associations, chamomile for sleep promotion and dye. Small quantities of other herbs that Sarah's accumulated knowledge suggests will contribute to marital harmony and domestic contentment. The physical process of stuffing the master tick requires all 4 family members working in coordination. Benjamin and Martha hold the casing while Sarah and Samuel feed the straw mixture into the opening. The large size of the tick, 6 feet by 7 feet, demands careful attention to even distribution of the stuffing materials. Sarah frequently pauses to check that the developing mattress maintains consistent thickness and density throughout its surface, adjusting the straw mixture and manipulating the contents to ensure optimal comfort and durability. As the afternoon progresses, the master tick takes shape as a substantial, well-proportioned mattress that will provide the foundation for William and Sarah's sleeping comfort throughout the coming year. The finished product weighs nearly 60 pounds, reflecting both its size and the generous quantity of stuffing materials it contains. Sarah's final inspection involves lying on the completed tick to test its support and comfort, checking for any irregularities that might disturb sleep or cause premature wear. The completion of the master tick marks the culmination of the day's primary labor, but the work is not yet finished. Each completed tick requires final preparation, thorough shaking to settle the contents, careful inspection of all seams and closures, and proper positioning for the curing process that will allow the botanical additives to blend with the straw and achieve their optimal effectiveness. Sarah arranges the completed ticks in the kitchen yard, where they will remain for several days, turned periodically to ensure even exposure to air and sunlight. This curing process allows the moisture content of the straw to stabilize, prevents the development of mold or mildew, and permits the various botanical additions to distribute their oils and fragrances throughout the mattress contents. The weather must be carefully monitored during this period, with the ticks moved to covered areas if rain threatens and returned to sunlight when conditions permit. The day's work concludes with the family cleaning and storing the tools and materials used in tick construction. The remaining straw returns to the barn for future use or animal bedding, while the surplus botanical materials are carefully preserved for next year's bedding construction. Sarah's sewing materials require particular attention, with needles cleaned and stored, thread organized by type and quality, and the work surfaces cleared of straw fragments and debris. As evening approaches and the family gathers for their final meal of the day, the sight of the completed ticks arranged in the yard serves as tangible evidence of their successful cooperation and domestic industry. The new bedding represents not only the coming year's sleeping comfort, but also the continuation of traditions and knowledge passed down through generations of contees. of colonial households. But as you observe, the Hartwell family concluding their annual tick-making ritual, a deeper question emerges about the relationship between seasonal labor and domestic comfort. How did the necessity of creating their own bedding from raw materials connect colonial families to the natural world and agricultural cycles in ways that modern consumers, accustomed to purchasing finished products, can barely comprehend? And what wisdom about self-sufficiency and resource management did families like the Hartwells possess that might serve contemporary households seeking greater independence from commercial systems? The week following the Great Tick-Making Day brings the careful ritual of installation and adjustment that transforms the Hartwell family's raw mattresses into the foundation of another year's sleeping comfort. You observe Sarah moving through the house with the measured precision of someone whose domestic knowledge encompasses not only the construction of bedding, but its proper integration into the complex system of seasonal household management that governs colonial family life. The installation process begins with the thorough cleaning and preparation of the bed frames themselves. William's carpentry skills, evident in the sturdy rope beds he constructed for each sleeping space, require annual maintenance to ensure optimal performance throughout the coming year. The rope networks that support the mattresses have stretched and settled during 12 months of use, requiring careful retightening and occasional replacement of individual cords that show signs of wear or damage. The master bedroom receives the most attention, as its bed frame must support not only the weight of 2 adult bodies, but also the substantial mass of the new straw tick. William works methodically through the rope network, testing each cord for proper tension and adjusting the wooden keys that control the tautness of the support system. The ropes must be tight enough to prevent sagging under the mattress weight, yet flexible enough to provide some give that contributes to sleeping comfort. Sarah assists her husband in this process, her domestic expertise complementing his mechanical knowledge. She understands how the rope tension affects the behavior of the straw tick, how different degrees of firmness contribute to sleeping comfort for bodies of various ages and sizes, and how the interaction between rope support and mattress contents influences the longevity of both components. Their cooperation in preparing the bed frame reflects the broader partnership that characterizes successful colonial marriages, relationships built on complementary skills, shared responsibility, and mutual respect for each partner's areas of Carter's areas. LAGC expertise. The placement of the master tick onto its prepared frame requires careful coordination between husband and wife. The 60-pound mattress, awkward in its bulk and tendency to shift its contents, must be positioned precisely to ensure even support and optimal comfort. Sarah guides the placement while William provides the lifting strength. Their movements coordinated by years of domestic cooperation and intimate knowledge of each other's physical capabilities and limitations. The initial placement of the tick reveals the sophisticated understanding of bedding dynamics that colonial housewives developed through practical experience. Sarah checks that the mattress sits evenly on the rope support, with no areas of excessive pressure that might cause premature wear or uncomfortable sleeping spots. She tests various portions of the mattress surface, pressing with her hands to ensure that the straw contents have settled properly and that the botanical additions remain evenly distributed throughout the tick. The first night's sleep on the new tick provides crucial information about the success of the construction process. William and Sarah approach this initial test with the careful attention of people whose comfort and health depend entirely on their ability to create satisfactory living conditions from raw materials and accumulated knowledge. They lie down together on the fresh mattress, assessing its firmness, noting any areas that require adjustment, and discussing how the new bedding compares to the previous year's arrangement. The straw beneath them rustles with the characteristic sounds of fresh bedding, the crisp whisper of wheat stalks settling under weight, the softer compression of oat straw finding its permanent position, the faint release of botanical fragrances as the dried herbs respond to body heat and pressure. These sounds and scents, familiar yet subtly different each year depending on growing conditions and harvest quality, connect the couple to the agricultural cycles that govern their lives and the natural processes that provide their domestic screws. They provide their domestic screw, long-lasting comfort. The children's bedding receives similar attention, though the installation process reflects their different needs and the hierarchical relationships that structure colonial family life. Benjamin's tick, nearly adult-sized and constructed with materials approaching the quality of his parents' bedding, requires substantial support and careful positioning. Sarah works with her eldest son to ensure that his sleeping arrangement provides the comfort and dignity appropriate to his approaching manhood, while maintaining the boundaries that preserve parental authority within the household. Martha's bedding installation becomes an opportunity for extended instruction in domestic management. Sarah explains to her daughter how the quality of bedding affects health and comfort, how proper maintenance extends the life of expensive materials, and how the annual cycle of bedding replacement connects to the larger rhythms of household management that will define Martha's adult responsibilities. The knowledge Martha gains during this process about mattress care, seasonal timing, and the relationship between domestic comfort and family welfare represents crucial preparation for her future role as a colonial housewife. Young Samuel's tick installation emphasizes the practical aspects of bedding management that even young children must understand. Sarah shows him how to position his mattress to prevent uneven wear, how to adjust his sleeping habits to preserve the tick's shape and comfort, and how his individual care contributes to the family's overall domestic efficiency. These lessons in personal responsibility and resource conservation reflect the broader colonial emphasis on self-reliance and community cooperation that enable families to thrive in challenging frontier environments. The hired man, Jacob's bedding installation receives attention proportionate to his status within the household. Sarah ensures that his tick is properly positioned and adequately supported, reflecting both Christian duty and practical recognition that a well-rested worker contributes more effectively to the farm's productivity. Jacob's foreign background, he speaks German as his first language and arrived in Virginia only 2 years earlier, communicate through a combination of English words, gestures, and demonstrations that transcend language barriers, while maintaining appropriate social boundaries between employer and employee. The weeks following the installation of the new ticks provide ongoing opportunities for adjustment and refinement. Sarah monitors each family member's sleeping comfort, noting any complaints or signs of inadequate rest that might indicate problems with their bedding. The straw contents of new ticks typically require several weeks to settle into their permanent configuration, during which time the mattresses may develop lumps, thin spots, or other irregularities that require attention. The maintenance of straw ticks throughout the year demands constant vigilance and periodic intervention. Sarah establishes a routine of weekly mattress inspection, checking for areas where the straw has compressed excessively or shifted to create uncomfortable lumps. When problems develop, she manipulates the tick contents through external pressure, working the straw back into proper position without opening the sewn casing that contains the filling materials. The seasonal challenges of maintaining straw bedding in colonial Virginia require adaptations to changing weather conditions and household needs. During the humid summer months, Sarah monitors the ticks for signs of moisture retention that might encourage mold or mildew development. She arranges for periodic airing of the mattresses, moving them outdoors during favorable weather to benefit from sun and air circulation that prevents the accumulation of moisture and odors. Winter weather presents different challenges, as the closed environment of heated houses concentrates the odors and moisture associated with human occupation. Sarah manages these challenges through careful attention to household ventilation, strategic use of botanical additives that provide natural deodorizing properties, and periodic rearrangement of bedding to ensure even wear and optimal comfort. Throughout the cold months when indoor time increases substantially, the social aspects of colonial bedding management extend beyond individual household needs to encompass community, relationships, and mutual assistance networks that characterize successful frontier settlements. Sarah shares her tick-making knowledge with neighboring women, participating in informal networks of domestic expertise that enable colonial families to benefit from accumulated wisdom about construction techniques, material preparation, and seasonal timing. These relationships, built through church attendance, seasonal celebrations, and mutual assistance during times of crisis, create communities of practice that preserve and transmit essential domestic knowledge across generations. The economic implications of successful bedding management contribute significantly to colonial household prosperity and independence. Families capable of producing their own comfortable bedding from farm-grown materials reduce their dependence on expensive, manufactured goods while ensuring sleeping comfort that supports health and productivity. The skills and knowledge required for tick construction represent valuable domestic assets that increase a family's self-sufficiency and economic resilience in an environment where cash money remains scarce and manufactured goods command premium. Prices. The annual cycle of tick replacement connects the Hartwell family to the broader rhythms of agricultural life and seasonal change that define existence in colonial Virginia. The timing of bedding construction, coordinated with grain harvests and botanical gathering, reflects sophisticated understanding of natural processes and resource management that enables families to maximize their use of available materials while ensuring year-round comfort and health as the autumn progresses and the new ticks settle into their permanent configurations. The success of the annual bedding construction becomes evident in the family's improved sleep quality and domestic comfort. The fresh straw provides better support and insulation than the compressed remains of the previous year's ticks. While the botanical additions contribute fragrances and pest control properties that make the long winter nights more pleasant and healthful, but as you observe the Hartwell family adapting to their new bedding and settling into another year's cycle of domestic life, a fundamental question emerges about the relationship between self-sufficiency and domestic comfort. In our modern world of manufactured mattresses and commercial bedding, have we gained convenience at the cost of the deep satisfaction and security that comes from creating the foundations of comfort with our own hands? And what essential knowledge about materials, construction, and seasonal adaptation did families like the Hartwells possess that might serve contemporary households seeking greater connection to the natural world and the sources of their daily comfort? The gaslight flickers against the grimy window of Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house on Dorset Street, Spitalfields, as you find yourself witness to a scene that captures the harsh realities of working-class life in 1870s London. The November rain pounds against the glass with the relentless persistence that characterizes English autumn weather, while inside, the narrow hallway echoes with the sounds of human habitation compressed into spaces never intended to accommodate so many bodies, so many lives, so many desperate attempts to find dignity and rest in circumstances that offer little of either. Mrs. Pemberton, a widow of 48, whose husband died in a factory accident 5 years earlier, operates this establishment with the grim efficiency of someone who understands that survival depends entirely on her ability to extract maximum income from minimal space. Her building, a converted Georgian townhouse that once housed a single, prosperous family, now shelters 16 working people in conditions that would shock even the medieval peasants, who once shared their single-room cottages with entire extended day. Families. The sleeping arrangements in Mrs. Pemberton's establishment reflect both the economic pressures of industrial London and the social hierarchies that persist even among the desperately poor. The building's 4 floors accommodate different classes of residents, with rent and comfort decreasing as one ascends toward the building's cramped attic spaces. On the ground floor, the former drawing room houses to married couples, each paying 8 shillings per week for the privilege of sharing. It's a space divided by hanging blankets that provide the illusion of privacy while offering no protection from noise, odors, or the intimate sounds of neighboring lives. The first floor, once the domain of the Georgian family's bedrooms, now accommodates 6 single men. Skilled tradesmen whose regular employment enables them to afford individual sleeping. Spaces measuring perhaps 6 feet by 8 feet. These rooms, created by subdividing the original chambers with thin wooden partitions, represent the boarding house's most desirable accommodations, private enough for a man to store his few possessions securely, large enough for a proper bed frame, and equipped with access to the single water closet that serves the entire building's population. The second floor houses the building's female residents and married women whose employment in the nearby textile factories, match works, and commercial laundries provides them with the minimal income necessary to secure individual sleeping arrangements away from the more dangerous mixed accommodations that characterize the cheapest lodging houses. These women, ranging in age from 16 to 60, navigate the complex social dynamics of shared living while maintaining the respectability that their economic circumstances make increasingly difficult to preserve. But it is the building's attic floor that demands your closest attention, for here live the newest arrivals to London's industrial economy, young men fresh from agricultural villages, Irish immigrants fleeing poverty and political persecution, and the chronically underemployed, whose irregular income places them at the very bottom of the boarding house hierarchy. These men, 8 in total, share a single long room where their sleeping arrangements consist of straw mattresses placed directly on the floor, arranged in rows that maximize the use of available space while providing each resident with barely enough room to lie down without touching his neighbors. The straw mattresses that serve these men represent the absolute bottom of Victorian England's bedding hierarchy. Yet even these crude sleeping arrangements embody knowledge and techniques developed over centuries of European domestic life. Mrs. Pemberton, despite her limited resources and the constant pressure to minimize expenses, understands that the quality of her residents' sleep directly affects their ability to work, pay rent, and maintain the social order that prevents her establishment from descending into chaos. The construction of these working-class straw mattresses begins with materials that reflect the realities of urban industrial life rather than the agricultural abundance that characterized rural bedding construction. London's straw comes not from carefully tended grain fields, but from the commercial suppliers who serve the city's massive population of horses, the transportation network that moves goods, and people through the metropolis's crowded streets. This straw, already compressed and soiled from its use as animal bedding, requires careful cleaning and sorting before it can serve human sleeping needs. Mrs. Pemberton purchases her straw from a dealer in Commercial Street who specializes in supplying the boarding houses, workhouses, and cheap lodging establishments that house London's industrial workforce. The straw arrives in compressed bales, bound with wire and reeking of the stables where it has absorbed the odors and moisture of working horses. The process of transforming this material into bedding suitable for human use demands both physical labor and accumulated knowledge about urban domestic management that Mrs. Pemberton has acquired through years of necessity-driven experience. The preparation of boarding house straw requires first the separation of usable stalks from the mass of compressed soiled material that comprises the purchased bales. Mrs. Pemberton, assisted by her 2 daughters Mary, age 22, and Elizabeth, age 19, spreads the straw in the building's small rear courtyard, working through each bale to identify stalks that retain enough structural integrity to provide sleeping support. The rejected material, perhaps half of the original purchase, serves as fuel for the building's inadequate heating system, or finds its way to the neighborhoods dust heaps where the urban poor scavenge for anything that might have value. The selected straw undergoes a cleaning process adapted to urban conditions and limited resources. unlike rural households with access to flowing streams and ample space for drying. Mrs. Pemberton must work within the constraints of city life and her building's cramped facilities. She soaks the chosen straw in the building's single water trough, using soap and lime to remove the worst odors and stains, then spreads the wet material on the building's flat roof, where London's smoky air and occasional sunshine provide whatever drying and purification the urban environment allows. The construction of the mattress casings reflects the economic pressures that govern every aspect of boarding house operation. Mrs. Pemberton cannot afford the fine linen ticking that characterizes middle-class bedding, nor even the serviceable cotton fabrics that rural families might weave for their own use. Instead, she purchases the cheapest available cloth-coarse hemp canvas, factory seconds with flaws that make them unsuitable for higher quality applications, and occasionally used grain sacks that she cleans and converts to bedding use. The sewing of these mattress casings requires skills that Mrs. Pemberton learned during her youth, when domestic education still emphasized the textile arts that enabled families to create their own household necessities. Her stitching, while functional rather than decorative, demonstrates the accumulated knowledge of generations of working-class women who understood that survival often depended on their ability to transform raw materials into essential domestic items. The seams must be strong enough to withstand the rough handling that boarding house life demands, yet constructed with thread and materials that represent the absolute minimum expenditure compatible with basic functionality. The filling of the straw mattresses takes place in the building's basement, where Mrs. Pemberton and her daughters work by candlelight to stuff the prepared casings with the clean straw. The process requires careful attention to density and distribution to loose, and the mattresses will compress into uncomfortable lumps within days of use. Too tight, and the sleeping surface becomes as hard and unyielding as the floor itself. Mrs. Pemberton's experience enables her to judge the proper stuffing density by feel, pressing the partially filled mattresses to ensure adequate support without excessive firmness. The botanical additions that characterized rural straw mattresses find limited application in the urban boarding house environment. Mrs. Pemberton cannot afford the herbs and aromatic plants that might improve her residents' sleeping comfort, nor does she have access to the gardens and wild spaces that provided rural households with natural bedding enhancements. Instead, she relies on more basic approaches to mattress improvementational additions of sawdust from nearby carpentry shops to absorb moisture, lime powder to discourage insects, and on rare occasions when finances permit, small quantities of cheap tobacco leaves whose strong odor masks the less pleasant smells that accumulate in heavily used bedding. The installation of these straw mattresses in the attic dormitory requires consideration of the space constraints and social dynamics that govern the residents' lives. Each mattress measures approximately 5 feet by 6 feet, sized to accommodate a single adult male while maximizing the number of sleeping spaces that can fit within the available floor area. Mrs. Pemberton arranges the mattresses in 2 rows of 4, leaving a narrow walkway down the center of the room that allows residents to access their sleeping spaces without stepping on their neighbors. Bedding. The residents of the attic dormitory represent the diversity of London's industrial working class men whose circumstances have brought them to the very margins of respectable society, yet who maintain hope that their current situation represents temporary hardship rather than permanent degradation. There is Patrick O'Sullivan, a 24-year-old Irishman who came to London seeking work after the potato crop failed in his home county of Cork. His mattress, positioned nearest the room's single small window, provides him with marginally better air circulation and a view of the street that connects him to the wider world beyond the boarding house walls. Next to Patrick lies the bedding of James Fletcher, a 30-year-old Englishman from rural Yorkshire who lost his agricultural employment when his landlord consolidated several small farms into a single large operation. James's adjustment to urban life has proved difficult, his rural skills finding limited application in London's industrial economy. Yet his physical strength and willingness to work have enabled him to find a regular employment as a dock laborer. When ships arrive requiring rapid loading and unloading, the mattress in the room's darkest corner belongs to Samuel Cohen, a 45-year-old Jewish immigrant from Poland who speaks limited English but possesses valuable skills as a tailor that enable him to find piecework in the clothing trades that dominate this part of London. Samuel's foreign background and religious differences isolate him from many of his fellow residents. Yet his steady income and quiet demeanor have earned him grudging acceptance within the boarding house's social hierarchy. The sleeping arrangements in Mrs. Pemberton's establishment reflect not only economic necessities, but also the complex social negotiations that enable diverse groups of people to coexist in extremely close quarters. The residents have developed informal rules about noise, privacy, and personal space that minimize conflicts while acknowledging the impossibility of true privacy in their shared living situation. These negotiations worked out through trial. An error over months of shared habitation represents sophisticated understanding of group dynamics and conflict resolution that enables the boarding house community to function despite the stress and tension that characterize their daily lives. The daily routine of mattress maintenance in the boarding house reflects the constraints of urban life and the residents' limited time and resources. Unlike rural families who could air their bedding regularly and replace straw seasonally, the boarding house residents must work within the limitations of their environment and schedule. Most residents work 12-hour shifts in factories, foundries, or construction sites, leaving them with minimal time and energy for domestic tasks beyond the most basic necessities of survival. Mrs. Pemberton assumes responsibility for basic mattress maintenance, understanding that her residents' ability to work and pay rent depends partly on their ability to achieve adequate rest in the sleeping accommodations she provides. Once weekly, weather permitting, she arranges for the mattresses to be moved to the building's rear courtyard, where they receive whatever airing and sunlight London's polluted atmosphere allows. This process requiring the cooperation of her daughters and any residents who happen to be available represents one of the few opportunities for the mattresses to dry out and air circulation to reduce the accumulation of moisture and odors. The replacement of straw in the boarding house mattresses follows economic rather than seasonal considerations. Mrs. Pemberton changes the mattress contents when they become so compressed or soiled that resonant complaints threaten to drive away paying customers, or when the accumulation of insects and vermin makes the bedding unsuitable for human use. This replacement typically occurs 2 or 3 times per year, far less frequently than the annual renewal that characterized rural straw bedding, reflecting the economic pressures that force urban boarding house operators to extend the life of materials far beyond their optimal useful period. As you observe the residents of Mrs. Pemberton's establishment preparing for sleep on this November evening, the question that emerges transcends the immediate concerns of Victorian working-class life. How did industrial urbanization transform the fundamental relationship between human beings and their sleeping environments? And what did people like Patrick, James, and Samuel lose when they exchanged the agricultural communities of their birth for the anonymous crowds and commercial relationships of industrial London, even as they gained access to wage labor and the possibility of economic advancement that urban life provided? The gaslight in the attic dormitory gutters and dies as the last of Mrs. Pemberton's pennyworth of illumination expires, plunging the 8 residents into the absolute darkness that characterizes London nights before the advent of electric street lighting. You find yourself immersed in the acoustic landscape of urban industrial slap the sounds of 8 men settling onto their straw mattresses. The creaking of the old building as it responds to wind and temperature changes, and the constant background noise of a city that never truly sleeps, even in the depths of night. Patrick O'Sullivan, the young Irishman whose mattress lies nearest the window, adjusts his position on the straw with the careful movements of someone who has learned to maximize his comfort within the constraints of his crude bedding arrangement. His straw mattress, like those of his 7 dormitory companions, has developed the characteristic indentations and lumps that result from months of nightly use without adequate maintenance or replacement. The wheat straw that forms the mattresses. Foundation has broken down into shorter fragments that provide less support and cushioning than when the bedding was first constructed, while the constant pressure of human bodies has compressed the filling into areas of uncomfortable hardness, alternating with spots where the straw has shifted away entirely, leaving the sleeper in direct contact with the rough hemp canvas of the mattress casing. The acoustic properties of straw bedding in the cramped confines of the boarding house dormitory create a complex soundscape that reflects both the material's natural characteristics and the social dynamics of shared sleeping spaces. Each movement on the straw mattresses produces the characteristic rustling sounds that have accompanied human sleep for centuries. Yet, in this urban context, these organic sounds blend with the industrial noises that penetrate the building from the surrounding. Streets the clatter of late-night cart traffic transporting goods to and from the docks. The mechanical sounds of nearby factories that operate around the clock. And the human voices of shift workers making their way through the narrow streets of Spitalfields. James Fletcher, the displaced Yorkshire farmer whose mattress occupies the position second from the window, lies awake listening to sounds that his rural upbringing never prepared him to interpret. The constant background noise of urban life steam, engines, machinery, voices speaking in unfamiliar accents and languages creates an environment that his nervous system struggles to accept as safe for sleep. His straw mattress, identical in construction to those of his dormitory companions, fails to provide the sense of security and comfort that he once found in his rural cottage's familiar bedding arrangements, the process of falling asleep on Victorian era. Straw mattresses in urban boarding house conditions requires adaptations that demonstrate human resilience and the body's ability to adjust to circumstances far from ideal. The residents have learned to position themselves on their mattresses in ways that minimize contact with the most compressed and uncomfortable areas while avoiding the lumps and ridges that develop where straw has shifted and accumulated. These sleeping positions, developed through weeks and months of trial and error, represent sophisticated knowledge of their individual beddings, characteristics, and the techniques necessary for achieving rest despite significant physical discomfort. Samuel Cohen, the Polish-Jewish tailor whose mattress lies in the room's darkest corner, brings to his sleeping arrangements the accumulated wisdom of someone who has experienced displacement and economic uncertainty throughout his adult life. His approach to sleep on the crude straw bedding reflects practical strategies developed during previous periods of hardship, techniques for relaxing muscles despite physical discomfort, methods for quieting anxiety about future security, and mental disciplines that enable rest even in environments that offer little genuine comfort or safety. The maintenance of personal hygiene within the constraints of boarding house life and straw bedding presents challenges that require constant attention and creative problem solving. The residents have limited access to washing facilities, a single cold water tap in the building's basement, and occasional opportunities to use the public baths that serve the working-class neighborhoods of East London. Their clothing, worn continuously for days or weeks between washings, transfers its accumulated odors and soil to the straw mattresses, while the mattresses themselves absorb and retain these smells in ways that would be impossible with modern synthetic materials. Mrs. Pemberton's attempts to manage the hygiene challenges of her establishment reflect both her limited resources and her understanding that extreme conditions require pragmatic solutions rather than ideal approaches. She distributes lime powder among the mattresses when her budget permits, understanding that this basic chemical treatment provides some protection against the insects and vermin that thrive in the warm, organic environment of straw bedding used by multiple occupants over extended periods. The lime serves dual purposes, discouraging pest populations while absorbing some of the moisture and odors that accumulate in heavily used bedding. The social dynamics of sleep in the shared dormitory environment require negotiations and accommodations that demonstrate remarkable human adaptability to circumstances that challenge basic needs for privacy and personal space. The 8 men have developed informal agreements about sleeping schedules, noise levels, and movement patterns that minimize disruptions while acknowledging that complete quiet and stillness are impossible in such close quarters. These agreements, negotiated through experience rather than formal discussion, represent sophisticated understanding of group psychology and conflict avoidance strategies. The arrival of new residents in the dormitory periodically disrupts these carefully developed sleeping arrangements, requiring the integration of unfamiliar individuals into established patterns of coexistence. When a mattress becomes available due to a resident's departure, whether through improved circumstances, illness, death, or simple inability to continue paying rent, must introduce a replacement resident into the delicate social ecosystem that enables 8 strangers to share sleeping space in relative peace. The seasonal challenges of sleeping on straw mattresses in an unheated London building require adaptations that demonstrate both the harsh realities of working-class life and the ingenious strategies that people develop to survive in difficult circumstances. During winter months, when the building's inadequate heating system provides minimal warmth to the upper floors, the residents rely primarily on shared body heat and whatever covering they can acquire to maintain survivable sleeping temperatures. The blankets available to dormitory residents reflect the economic constraints that govern every aspect of their lives. Most possess only a single covering, perhaps a worn wool blanket purchased secondhand, a quilt sewn from fabric scraps, or simply additional layers of clothing that serve dual purposes as both daytime garments and nighttime bedding. The sharing of warmth becomes a necessity that overrides privacy concerns, with residents arranging themselves on their individual mattresses in ways that maximize heat retention, while maintaining the social boundaries that preserve dignity and prevent conflicts. Summer weather presents different challenges, as the building's upper floors become stifling in London's humid heat, while the straw mattresses retain and amplify the warmth generated by multiple bodies in close proximity. The residents develop strategies for cooling that work within their limited options, positioning themselves on their mattresses to maximize air circulation from the room's single small window, removing layers of clothing when privacy concerns permit, and timing their sleep periods to avoid the hottest portions of the day. When their work schedules allow such flexibility, the health implications of sleeping on poorly maintained straw mattresses in crowded urban conditions represent serious concerns that the residents address through whatever means their circumstances permit. The accumulation of dust, debris, and organic matter in the mattress contents creates environments that harbor bacteria, fungi, and parasites that can cause skin conditions, respiratory problems, and systemic infections. The residents' limited access to medical care means that minor health issues often develop into serious conditions that affect their ability to work and maintain their economic stability. The presence of insects and vermin in the boarding house. Bedding requires constant vigilance and whatever control measures the residents can implement with their limited resources. Fleas, bedbugs, and lice find ideal conditions in the warm, organic environment of straw mattresses used by multiple occupants, while mice and rats are attracted to the food crumbs and organic matter that inevitably accumulate in the shared living spaces. The residents employ traditional pest control methods, crushing visible insects, shaking out their clothing and bedding when possible, and using whatever folk remedies they can obtain or afford. The psychological impact of sleeping in such conditions affects the residents' mental health and social relationships in ways that compound the physical challenges of their circumstances. The constant stress of overcrowding, lack of privacy, and physical discomfort creates conditions that test human resilience and social cooperation. Some residents develop coping mechanisms that enable them to maintain hope and work toward improved circumstances, while others succumb to despair, alcohol abuse, or antisocial behaviors that further complicate the dormitory's social dynamics. The economic calculations that govern the residents. Decisions about their sleeping arrangements reflect the harsh mathematics of survival in industrial London. The cost of a straw mattress in Mrs. Pemberton's dormitory, typically 2 shillings per week, represents a significant portion of most residents' income. Yet the alternatives available to people of their economic status often prove even less satisfactory. Sleeping rough in the streets exposes them to weather, police harassment, and criminal victimization, while the workhouse dormitories offer even more crowded conditions with additional restrictions on personal freedom and dignity. The residents' dreams and aspirations, shared during the quiet conversations that sometimes occur in the darkness before sleep, reveal the human hopes that persist despite their harsh circumstances. Patrick speaks of his desire to save enough money to bring his sister from Ireland, while James fantasizes about returning to agricultural work in a colony where land remains available to men willing to work hard. Samuel plans for the day when his tailoring skills might enable him to establish his own shop and escape the uncertainty of piecework employment. These conversations, conducted in whispers that respect their neighbor's need for sleep, create bonds of mutual support and understanding that help the residents maintain their humanity despite the dehumanizing aspects of their living conditions. The shared experience of sleeping on crude straw mattresses in overcrowded conditions creates a form of solidarity that transcends the cultural and linguistic differences that might otherwise divide them. As the night progresses and the residents gradually surrender to sleep despite their uncomfortable bedding, the question that emerges from observation of their circumstances concerns not only the immediate challenges of finding rest on inadequate mattresses, but the broader implications of industrial urbanization for human dignity and social relationships. How did the transformation from agricultural to industrial society affect not only the physical conditions of sleep, but also the social bonds and community relationships that had traditionally provided security and support during times of hardship? And what essential elements of human community were lost when economic pressures forced people into anonymous, urban living arrangements that prioritized efficiency over dignity and human connection? The dawn light filtering through the grimy window of the attic dormitory reveals the full complexity of life lived on the margins of Victorian society. As the 8 residents of Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house begin their daily transformation, from vulnerable sleepers to working men ready to face another day in industrial London, you observe the morning ritual that has evolved among these strangers. Thrust together by economic necessity, careful choreography of movement, and consideration that enables them to prepare for their day's labor while respecting the limited space and resources they share. Patrick O'Sullivan, whose position nearest the window allows him to monitor the street activity that signals the beginning of another working day, typically wakes first as the sound of cartwheels and early pedestrians penetrates the building's thin walls. His straw mattress, compressed from months of nightly use, retains the depression created by his body throughout the night, a permanent indentation that maps the contours of his sleeping position while demonstrating the gradual deterioration that characterizes all aspects of boarding house life. The process of rising from a straw mattress that has been slept on for months without adequate maintenance requires careful attention to the body's adjustment to vertical position after hours spent on an uneven, unsupportive surface. Patrick's movements reflect the stiffness and discomfort that result from sleeping on bedding that provides minimal cushioning between his body and the hard floor beneath. His morning routine includes stretching and adjusting his spine and joints to compensate for the poor sleeping support, while his clothing, wrinkled and shaped by the straw's uneven surface, requires smoothing and adjustment to achieve a presentable appearance for the day's work. The sharing of the dormitories limited. Washing facilities demonstrates both the residents' ingenuity in managing scarce resources and the social cooperation that enables. Multiple people to prepare for their day within. Severe time constraints. The building's single water source, a cold tap in the basement, serves the needs of 16 residents who must complete their morning preparations before departing for work shifts that typically begin at 6 or 7 o'clock. The residents have developed an informal scheduling system that ensures access to washing facilities while minimizing conflicts and delays that could jeopardize their employment. James Fletcher, the displaced Yorkshire farmer whose rural background provided no preparation for the complex negotiations required by urban boarding house life, has gradually learned to adapt his morning routine to the constraints of shared living. His straw mattress, identical in construction to those of his dormitory companions, has developed its own characteristic pattern of lumps and depressions that reflect his particular sleeping habits and body weight distribution. The mattress's deterioration mirrors his own gradual adaptation to urban life, a process of accommodation and compromise that has required abandoning many of the comfort expectations he brought from his rural upbringing. The economic pressures that govern every aspect of boarding house life become particularly evident during the morning preparation period, when residents must balance their need for adequate grooming and nutrition against the time constraints imposed by their work schedules and the financial limitations that restrict their access to basic necessities. Most residents begin their day with minimal food, perhaps a piece of bread saved from the previous day's meal, tea brewed from leaves used multiple times, or nothing at all if their economic circumstances have reached particularly desperate levels. Samuel Cohen, the Polish-Jewish tailor whose foreign background and limited English have complicated his integration into London's working-class community, faces additional challenges in managing his morning routine within the boarding house environment. His religious observances, requiring specific prayers and rituals that his dormitory companions may not understand or appreciate, must be conducted with discretion to avoid conflicts while maintaining his spiritual practices that provide psychological support during his difficult adjustment to urban life. The maintenance and care of the straw mattresses represents an ongoing challenge that Mrs. Pemberton addresses through pragmatic strategies, adapted to her limited resources and the realities of commercial boarding house operation. The weekly airing of mattresses, weather permitting, provides the only opportunity for the bedding to receive sunlight and air circulation that might reduce the accumulation of moisture, odors, and organic debris that accumulate in heavily used straw bedding. This process requires coordination among residents, building management, and weather conditions that often fail to align in ways that permit optimal mattress maintenance. The gradual deterioration of the straw mattresses over months of continuous use demonstrates both the natural decomposition processes that affect organic materials and the accelerated wear that results from inadequate maintenance and excessive use. The wheat straw that originally provided structural support and cushioning breaks down into smaller fragments that compress more readily and provide less resilience, while the hemp canvas casings develop weak spots and small tears that allow straw fragments to escape and create uncomfortable lumps and ridges in the sleeping surface. Mrs. Pemberton's decisions about mattress replacement reflect the economic calculations that govern all aspects of boarding house operation, balancing the cost of new materials against the risk of losing paying residents who find their sleeping accommodations unacceptably uncomfortable. Her experience has taught her to extend the life of mattresses far beyond their optimal useful period, employing makeshift repairs and strategic restuffing that maintain minimal functionality, while deferring the expense of complete replacement until absolutely necessary. The social dynamics among dormitory residents evolve continuously as individuals arrive, depart, and adapt to the challenges of shared living in extremely close quarters. The men have developed informal leadership structures and conflict resolution mechanisms that enable them to address disputes and coordinate activities without appealing to Mrs. Pemberton's authority, except in extreme circumstances. These social arrangements reflect both their individual personalities and backgrounds and the collective wisdom they have developed about managing group living under stressful conditions, the health consequences of prolonged sleeping on deteriorating straw mattresses and poorly ventilated, overcrowded conditions manifest in various ways that affect the residents' ability to work and maintain their economic stability. Skin conditions resulting from contact with dust, debris, and parasites that accumulate in the bedding require treatment that most residents cannot afford. While respiratory problems caused by inhaling particles from decomposing organic matter compound the health challenges created by London's polluted air and industrial working conditions, the residents' strategies for managing these health challenges demonstrate both individual resilience and collective knowledge about survival in difficult circumstances. They share information about folk remedies and treatments that can be prepared from inexpensive materials, coordinate care for individuals who become too ill to work, and develop early warning systems that help prevent the spread of contagious diseases that could devastate their small community's economic stability. The relationship between sleeping, comfort, and work performance becomes particularly evident in the boarding house environment, where residents' ability to earn income depends directly on their capacity for physical labor despite inadequate rest. The men who sleep on the most deteriorated mattresses often show signs of chronic fatigue and reduced physical capacity that affect their productivity and earning potential, creating a downward spiral where poor sleep leads to reduced income, which prevents investment in better sleeping arrangements, which further degrades sleep quality. The seasonal challenges of maintaining health and comfort while sleeping on straw mattresses in an inadequately heated building require adaptations that test human endurance and creativity. During London's harsh winters, when the building's minimal heating system provides insufficient warmth to the upper floors, residents must rely on shared body heat, layered clothing, and whatever additional covering they can acquire through purchase, trade, or improvisation. The psychological impact of sleeping in such conditions affects not only individual mental health, but also the social relationships that enable the boarding house community to function. Some residents develop coping mechanisms that help them maintain hope and work toward improved circumstances, focusing on long-term goals, maintaining connections with family members in other locations, or finding meaning in religious or political beliefs that provide perspective on their current hardships. Others struggle with depression, anxiety, and despair that compound the physical challenges of their circumstances and may lead to behaviors that disrupt the dormitory's social equilibrium. The residents have learned to recognize and respond to these psychological challenges through informal support networks that provide emotional assistance and practical help during periods of crisis or breakdown. The economic mobility or lack thereof experienced by boarding house residents reflects broader patterns of social and economic opportunity in Victorian London. Some individuals, through combination of skill, luck, and determination, manage to improve their circumstances sufficiently to afford better living arrangements, while others find themselves trapped in cycles of poverty and instability that make escape from boarding house life increasingly difficult. The stories of departure from Mrs. Pemberton's establishment reveal both the possibilities and limitations of social mobility in industrial society. Patrick's dreams of bringing his sister from Ireland represent hope for family reunification and mutual support that might enable both siblings to achieve better circumstances than either could manage alone. James's fantasies about colonial agricultural opportunities reflect awareness that social and economic constraints in industrial England might be overcome through geographic mobility and access to natural resources still available in developing territories. Samuel's plans for establishing his own tailoring business demonstrate understanding that skilled trades might provide pathways to economic independence for immigrants willing to work within established commercial systems while adapting to local customs and market conditions. These individual aspirations, shared during the quiet conversations that occur in the darkness before sleep, create bonds of mutual encouragement and support that help residents maintain motivation. Despite their difficult circumstances, the broader implications of boarding house life for social cohesion and community development in industrial cities extend beyond the immediate experiences of individual residents to encompass questions about the relationship between economic systems and human dignity. The transformation of housing from family-based domestic spaces to commercial enterprises focused on maximizing income from minimal space reflects fundamental changes in how urban societies organize domestic life and social relationships. The knowledge and skills that residents develop while adapting to boarding house life, strategies for managing scarce resources, techniques for maintaining health and hygiene under difficult conditions, methods for negotiating social relationships in stressful environments represent valuable human capabilities that enable survival and adaptation in challenging circumstances. Yet these same capabilities developed in response to inadequate living conditions also demonstrate the human costs of economic systems that prioritize efficiency and profit over basic human needs for comfort, privacy, and dignity. As you observe, the residents of Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house completing their morning preparations and departing for another day of industrial labor. The fundamental question that emerges concerns not only the immediate challenges of sleeping on deteriorating straw mattresses in overcrowded conditions, but the broader implications of urbanization and industrialization for human community and individual well-being. What essential elements of human dignity and social connection were sacrificed when economic pressures forced people into anonymous commercial living arrangements? And what lessons from their resilience and adaptation might inform contemporary efforts to address housing insecurity and social isolation in modern urban environments? The autumn sun slants through the kitchen window of the Anderson homestead in rural Nebraska, casting long shadows across the rough wooden floor as you witness what may be among the final preparations of straw bedding in American domestic life. The year is 1894, and while the growing towns and cities of the expanding nation increasingly embrace manufactured mattresses filled with cotton, horsehair, or the new spring constructions emerging from urban factories, isolated farming families like the Andersons continue to rely on methods and materials that would have been familiar to their great-grandparents on the colonial frontier. Eric Anderson, a Norwegian immigrant who claimed his 160-acre homestead under the provisions of the Homestead Act 12 years earlier, stands in the doorway of his modest frame house, surveying the preparations that will soon transform the year's grain harvest into another winter's sleeping comfort for his family of 6. His weathered hands, scarred by years of prairie farming and construction work, hold a wooden rake that he has crafted himself from ashwood cut in the grove of trees he planted during his first year on the claim. Trees that now provide the homestead with its only protection from the relentless winds that sweep across the Nebraska grasslands. The Anderson House, built by Eric's own labor with materials purchased in town and lumber milled from his own trees, represents the solid prosperity that hard work and favorable weather can produce on the American prairie. The structure measures 24 feet by 32 feet, providing 4 rooms and a root cellar that houses the family's winter food supplies. The construction, while modest by the standards of established Eastern settlements, offers substantial improvement over the sod house that sheltered the family during their first 2 years on the homestead, when every available dollar went toward purchasing seed tools and livestock rather than building materials. Eric's wife, Ingrid, moves through the house with the efficient purposefulness of a woman who has learned to manage a prairie household with minimal resources and maximum self-reliance. At 34, she has borne 6 children and maintained a domestic operation that encompasses not only cooking, cleaning, and childcare, but also the production of textiles, preservation of food, maintenance of the family's health through herbal remedies, and the countless other tasks that enable an isolated farming family to thrive in an environment that offers limited access to commercial goods and services. The Anderson children: Lars, age 16, Anna, 14, Nils, 12, Carrie, 10, OL, 7, and little Astrid, just 4 years old, to contribute to the household according to their capabilities and the Norwegian traditions of family cooperation that Eric and Ingrid have maintained. Despite their geographic displacement from the homeland, the preparation of the family's annual straw bedding represents one of those domestic rituals that binds the family together through shared labor while connecting them to generations of ancestors who faced similar challenges in creating comfort and security from the materials that the natural world provides. The timing of the bedding preparation reflects the agricultural calendar that governs every aspect of prairie farm life. The wheat harvest, completed in late August, has provided the family with both grain for sale and the straw that will fill their mattresses for the coming year. The oat crop, harvested in early September, contributes additional bedding material, while supplying feed for the family's livestock. The careful coordination of these agricultural activities with domestic needs demonstrates the integrated nature of prairie farming, where every aspect of production serves multiple purposes in Torio Seas. In the family's survival strategy, the straw that will fill the Anderson family's mattresses represents careful selection and preparation that reflects generations of accumulated knowledge about the relationship between agricultural materials and domestic comfort. Eric has set aside the finest wheat straw, straight, golden stalks cut at the optimal stage of ripeness and handled carefully to preserve their structural integrity and cushioning properties. This premium straw, perhaps 1/10 of the total harvest, represents a significant investment of the family's agricultural production in their domestic comfort, reflecting both their improved economic circumstances and their understanding of the relationship between adequate rest and productive labor. Ingrid has spent the weeks since harvest time preparing the botanical additions that will transform basic straw ticks into sources of comfort, health, and sensory pleasure. The prairie environment, while lacking the diverse plant communities of forested regions, provides its own opportunities for those with knowledge of wild plants and their domestic applications. She has gathered wild mint from the creek bottom that runs through the southern portion of their land, dried artemisia from the prairie uplands for its insect-repelling properties, and collected the fragrant grass known locally as sweetgrass that grows in the marshy areas near the creek. The preparation of mattress casings reflects both the family's improved economic circumstances and Ingrid's accumulated skills in textile production. Unlike the early years of their homestead, when every scrap of cloth served multiple purposes and mattress casings were sewn from whatever fabric could be obtained through trade or occasional purchase, the family now possesses sufficient linen and cotton cloth to create proper ticking for each family member's bedding. This cloth, while still representing significant household investment, demonstrates the economic progress that successful homesteading can achieve when favorable weather, hard work, and careful management combine to create agricultural prosperity. The construction techniques employed by the Anderson family reflect the synthesis of Old World knowledge and New World adaptation that characterizes successful immigrant adjustment to American frontier conditions. Ingrid's methods for preparing and blending straw derive from Norwegian traditions passed down through her maternal line, while her adaptations to prairie plants and American materials demonstrate the flexibility and innovation required for survival. In new environments, the family's sleeping arrangements reflect both their improved circumstances and the social hierarchies that persist even in the democratic environment of the American frontier. Eric and Ingrid occupy the master bedroom, furnished with a substantial rope bed frame that Eric constructed during the family's 3rd year on the homestead, when their agricultural success first enabled investment in domestic comfort beyond basic survival needs. Their mattress, measuring 6 feet by 7 feet, will receive the finest materials and most careful construction that the family can provide. Lars, The eldest son, who's approaching manhood and increasing responsibility in farm operations, earn him individual sleeping accommodations. Occupies a smaller bedroom, furnished with a narrower bed frame appropriate to his transitional status between childhood and full adult responsibility. His mattress construction will reflect both his growing importance within the family structure and the practical recognition that adequate rest enables him to contribute more effectively to the farm's labor requirements. The remaining children share sleeping accommodations according to age and gender, with Anna and Carrie occupying one bed while Nils and Ole share another, and little Astrid sleeping in a small bed positioned in her parents' room where her nighttime needs can be attended, without disturbing the entire household. These arrangements, while still requiring careful coordination and cooperation among family members, represent substantial improvement over the overcrowded conditions that characterized their early homestead years when the entire family shared a single room and minimal bedding. The process of preparing straw for mattress construction begins with the careful sorting and cleaning that distinguishes bedding straw from the material used for animal feed and other farm purposes. Eric and Lars work together to separate the finest stalks from the general straw storage, examining each bundle for evidence of moisture damage, insect infestation, or structural weakness that would make it unsuitable for bedding use. This selection process, while time-consuming, ensures that the family's sleeping comfort will not be compromised by inferior materials that might compress quickly or harbor pests and vermin. The cleaning process adapted to prairie conditions reflects both the family's Norwegian heritage and their adjustment to the environmental challenges of their new homeland. The persistent wind that characterizes the Nebraska climate provides natural assistance in separating chaff and debris from usable straw, while the family's experience with prairie dust storms has taught them techniques for protecting and preserving materials that might be contaminated by airborne particles. Ingrid supervises the preparation of botanical additions with the same careful attention that she devotes to all aspects of domestic production that affect family health and comfort. Her knowledge of prairie plants, accumulated through 12 years of observation, experimentation, and exchange of information with neighboring farm wives, enables her to identify and utilize local species that provide benefits similar to the European plants her Norwegian heritage taught her to value for domestic purposes. The wild mint gathered from the creek bottom undergoes careful drying and processing to preserve its aromatic and medicinal properties throughout the winter months. When fresh plant materials become unavailable, Ingrid spreads the mint leaves on screens improvised from window screening and wooden frames, positioning them in the house's warmest, driest location where air circulation will remove moisture while preserving the volatile oils that provide the plant's beneficial characteristics. The Artemisia, known locally as prairie sage, requires different treatment to maximize its effectiveness as an insect repellent and natural preservative. Ingrid bundles the plant stems while they retain some moisture, then hangs them in the house's upper regions where rising warm air will dry them slowly while preventing the loss of aromatic compounds that provide their practical benefits. This drying method, adapted from techniques she learned in Norway for preserving different plants, demonstrates the flexibility and innovation that successful frontier adaptation requires. The sweetgrass, valued for its pleasant fragrance and spiritual significance in Native American traditions that Ingrid has learned to respect through contact with local indigenous peoples, receives processing that reflects her growing understanding of prairie plant communities and their domestic applications. She braids the grass while it remains pliable, creating compact bundles that will release their fragrance gradually when incorporated into mattress stuffing. While the braided form provides structural benefits that loose grass cannot offer, the physical workspace for mattress construction reflects both the family's improved circumstances and the continuing constraints of frontier domestic life. The kitchen, as the largest room in the house and the location of the family's primary work surface, serves as the center for bedding preparation activities. Ingrid has cleared the large wooden table that Eric built during their 4th year on the homestead, providing space for cutting and sewing mattress casings while keeping the work area elevated above the floor-level dust and debris that characterizes prairie farm life. The tools required for mattress construction demonstrate both the family's growing collection of specialized domestic equipment and their continued reliance on multi-purpose items that serve various household functions. Ingrid's sewing equipment, accumulated gradually over the years of homestead life, now includes quality needles, sharp scissors, and sufficient thread to complete major textile projects without the careful economizing that characterized their early years when every thread represented significant expenditure. The measurement and cutting of mattress casings requires precision that reflects both Ingrid's accumulated skills and her understanding of the relationship between proper construction and long-term durability. Each casing must accommodate the specific dimensions of its intended bed frame while allowing for the expansion that occurs when the casing is stuffed with straw. The seaming must be strong enough to withstand the stress of stuffing and daily use while remaining neat, enough to reflect the family's pride in their domestic accomplishments. As the afternoon progresses and the family settles into the rhythm of domestic production that characterizes significant household projects, the question that emerges from observation of their activities extends beyond the immediate concerns of bedding construction to encompass broader issues of cultural continuity and adaptation. How did immigrant families like the Andersons maintain connection to their European heritage while adapting to American frontier conditions? And what essential knowledge about self-reliance and domestic production did they possess that enabled them to create comfort and security in environments that offered minimal access to commercial goods and services, yet might hold valuable lessons for contemporary families seeking greater independence from commercial systems and deeper connection to the sources of their daily comfort? The afternoon work unfolds with the methodical precision that characterizes all successful domestic enterprises on the American prairie. As the Anderson family transforms their morning's preparations into the physical construction of bedding that will serve them through another Great Plains winter, you observe Ingrid directing the complex choreography of family cooperation that enables 6 people of different ages and capabilities to contribute meaningfully to a project that requires both individual skills and coordinated effort. Young Lars, at 16, already possessing much of his father's physical strength and an increasing understanding of his role as the family's future head, takes responsibility for the heavy work of handling and positioning the large quantities of straw required for mattress construction. His movements reflect both the confidence of approaching manhood and the careful attention to family hierarchy that Norwegian traditions emphasize, contributing his capabilities fully while deferring to his parents' authority and accumulated wisdom. Anna, at 14, occupies the crucial transitional position where childhood begins to yield to adult responsibility, particularly in the domestic skills that will define her future role as wife and household manager. Her participation in mattress construction provides essential education in the textile arts, resource management, and seasonal planning that enable prairie farm wives to maintain family comfort and health despite isolation from commercial sources of domestic goods and services. The construction of Eric and Ingrid's master bedroom mattress begins with the careful arrangement of the finest materials. The family has prepared premium wheat straw, selected for its structural integrity and cushioning properties, supplemented with softer oat straw that will provide the surface comfort essential for restful sleep. Ingrid's knowledge, developed through 20 years of domestic experience that began in Norway and continued through the challenges of American frontier life, guides the precise blending of materials that will create optimal sleeping support. Throughout the months of intensive use that lie ahead, the process of stuffing the master mattress requires coordination among all family members capable of contributing to the work. Eric and Lars manage the heavy work of holding the mattress casing open and feeding large quantities of straw into the opening, while Ingrid supervises the distribution and density to ensure even support across the mattress surface. Anna assists with the detailed work of arranging botanical additions and adjusting straw placement in areas that require special attention, while the younger children contribute according to their capabilities, sorting materials, fetching supplies, and learning through observation the domestic skills they will need in their own adult lives. The botanical additions to the master mattress reflect both Ingrid's accumulated knowledge of plant properties and her adaptation to the specific challenges of prairie domestic life. The wild mint, carefully dried and preserved from the summer's gathering, provides both pleasant fragrance and natural insect-repelling properties that will help maintain mattress freshness throughout the long winter months when opportunities for airing and cleaning become limited. The Artemisia contributes stronger insect control while adding the distinctive scent that many prairie families associate with home comfort and security. The sweetgrass, woven into small bundles and distributed throughout the mattress contents, represents Ingrid's growing appreciation for the plant, knowledge that indigenous peoples have developed through centuries of prairie life. Her incorporation of these native materials demonstrates the cultural adaptation and learning that characterize successful frontier settlement. The willingness to adopt useful practices from all available sources while maintaining core family traditions and values. The physical demands of mattress construction in frontier conditions require techniques adapted to the realities of limited tools and workspace. The family has developed methods for achieving proper stuffing density without the specialized equipment that might be available in established Eastern communities, relying instead on manual techniques that require coordination and experience, but produce results suitable for their needs and life circumstances. Ingrid tests the mattress density by pressing various portions of the surface, checking for areas that might compress too quickly under body weight or develop uncomfortable lumps that would disturb sleep. Her assessment considers not only immediate comfort, but also the long-term performance characteristics that will determine whether the mattress maintains adequate support throughout months of nightly use. The knowledge required for these judgments, accumulated through years of practical experience, represents sophisticated understanding of materials, science, and human comfort that rivals any formal training in domestic arts. The completion of the master mattress requires approximately 4 hours of concentrated family effort, including the final sewing that seals the opening and the manipulation required to achieve even distribution of contents throughout the casing. The finished product weighs nearly 70 pounds, reflecting both its substantial size and the generous quantity of high-quality materials it contains. Eric tests the completed mattress by lying on various portions of its surface, checking that it provides adequate support for his larger frame, while remaining comfortable for Ingrid's lighter weight. The construction of Lars's individual mattress provides an opportunity for extended instruction in the domestic skills that will serve him when he establishes his own household. While Norwegian tradition emphasizes masculine roles in agricultural and construction work, frontier conditions require that all family members understand basic domestic arts that enable self-sufficiency in isolated environments. Lars's participation in mattress construction teaches him not only the technical skills required for bedding preparation, but also the planning and resource management that enable families to create comfort from raw materials. The materials allocated to Lars's mattress reflect both his growing status within the family hierarchy and practical considerations about his physical needs and sleeping habits. His mattress receives good quality wheat straw foundation with adequate oat straw supplementation for comfort, while the botanical additions focus primarily on practical concerns about pest control and mattress preservation rather than the luxurious fragrances that characterize his parents' bedding. Anna's education during mattress construction encompasses not only the technical skills of textile work, but also the broader knowledge of household management that will define her adult responsibilities. Ingrid explains the reasoning behind her material choices, the seasonal timing that coordinates bedding preparation with agricultural activities, and the economic calculations that determine how family resources are allocated among competing. Domestic needs, the construction of mattresses for the younger children provides opportunities for them to contribute according to their developing capabilities while learning through participation the family cooperation that enables successful homestead operation. Niels and Ole work together to sort straw materials and assist with the lighter tasks of mattress preparation, while young Carrie learns by watching and helping with simple activities appropriate to her age and abilities. Little Astrid, at 4 years old, observes the process while playing quietly with scraps of fabric and straw that provide her with materials for imaginary/domestic activities that mirror the adult work occurring around her. The children's mattresses receive construction appropriate to their smaller size and lighter weight, with materials selected to provide adequate comfort while acknowledging their lower position in the family hierarchy. The straw filling consists primarily of good quality wheat straw with modest additions of softer materials, while the botanical additions focus on practical concerns about health and cleanliness rather than luxury enhancements. The seasonal considerations that govern mattress construction timing reflect the Magison family's accumulated wisdom about prairie climate and agricultural scheduling. The work must be completed after harvest provides the necessary straw materials, but before winter. Weather makes outdoor activities difficult and indoor workspaces more congested, with family members spending increased time inside the house. The timing also coordinates with other domestic activities that compete for family labor during the crucial autumn preparation period. The storage and curing of completed mattresses requires adaptation to prairie conditions and the family's limited indoor space. The finished mattresses are arranged in the house's upper level, where air circulation will help the botanical additions distribute their oils and fragrances throughout the straw contents while the materials settle into their final configuration. The mattresses must be turned periodically during this curing process to ensure even exposure to air movement and prevent the development of moisture accumulation that might encourage mold or mildew growth. The economic implications of successful bedding construction extend beyond immediate family comfort to encompass broader questions of household self-sufficiency and resource management. The Anderson family's ability to create quality bedding from materials produced on their own land reduces their dependence on commercial suppliers while enabling them to invest available cash in other aspects of farm development and family welfare. The knowledge and skills demonstrated during mattress construction represent valuable household assets that contribute to the family's economic security and domestic comfort. Ingrid's expertise in textile production, botanical preparation, and domestic planning enables the family to achieve living standards that would require substantial cash expenditure if they depended entirely on commercial sources for their household needs. The social aspects of mattress construction reflect the family cooperation and mutual dependence that characterize successful homestead operation. Each family member's contribution, whether physical labor, technical skill, or simply patient cooperation during the disruption that major domestic projects create, demonstrates understanding of collective responsibility and shared benefit that enable families to achieve results beyond what individual effort could accomplish. The cultural continuity represented by the family's bedding construction techniques connects them to Norwegian traditions while demonstrating adaptation to American frontier conditions. The synthesis of Old World knowledge and New World materials creates domestic practices that maintain family identity while enabling successful adjustment to their new environment. The completion of the family's annual bedding construction marks not only the conclusion of a major domestic project, but also the family's preparation for another prairie winter. The new mattresses represent security and comfort that will support the family's health and rest during the months when outdoor activities become limited and indoor comfort assumes greater importance for family welfare and morale. As evening approaches, and the family surveys their completed Work6 mattresses arranged for curing. Workspace cleaned and restored to normal use, and materials properly stored for future needs. The satisfaction evident in their expressions reflects both immediate accomplishment and deeper understanding of their growing mastery over the challenges of prairie homestead life. But as you observe the Anderson family concluding their annual mattress construction, a broader question emerges about the relationship between self-sufficiency and domestic comfort in rapidly changing American society, as the 1890s bring increasing industrialization and commercial availability of manufactured goods to even remote frontier areas. What essential knowledge and capabilities will families like the Andersons lose if they abandon traditional domestic production methods? And what values about family cooperation, resource management, and connection to natural materials might contemporary families recover by understanding the domestic arts that enabled their ancestors to create comfort and security through their own knowledge and labor? The first frost of autumn arrives early in November 1894, coating the prairie grass with crystalline beauty, while serving notice that the Great Plains winter approaches with its characteristic mixture of breathtaking severity and stunning beauty. You find yourself observing the Anderson family as they settle into the domestic rhythms that their carefully constructed straw bedding will support throughout the months ahead. When the Nebraska landscape transforms into a world of snow, wind, and temperatures that test both human endurance and the effectiveness of every preparation made during the more hospitable seasons, the installation of the cured mattresses into their designated bed frames marks the completion of the family's transition from autumn preparation to winter readiness. Eric moves through the house with the satisfied efficiency of a man who has learned to anticipate and prepare for seasonal challenges, positioning each mattress with careful attention to the support characteristics that will determine its performance throughout months of intensive use. His carpentry skills, evident in the sturdy bed frames he has constructed for each family member, reflect the integration of old-world craftsmanship with American materials and frontier conditions. The master bedroom receives the most attention. During mattress installation, as Eric and Ingrid work together to position their substantial mattress on the rope bed frame that has served them through 8 prairie winters, the coordination required for maneuvering the 70-pound mattress into optimal position demonstrates the partnership that characterizes their marriage, a relationship built on complementary skills, shared responsibilities, and mutual respect that enables them to manage the complex demands of homestead life. Ingrid tests the installed mattress with the critical assessment of someone whose comfort and rest depend entirely on the quality of work she has supervised. Her evaluation considers not only immediate comfort, but also the long-term performance characteristics that will determine whether the bedding maintains adequate support and freshness. Throughout the winter months, when opportunities for maintenance and adjustment become severely limited by weather conditions, the first night's sleep on the new mattress provides crucial information about the success of the family's annual bedding construction project. Eric and Ingrid approach this initial test with the careful attention of people whose domestic comfort depends entirely on their ability to create satisfactory living conditions from raw materials and accumulated knowledge. The fresh straw beneath them rustles with the characteristic sounds of new bedding, crisp whispers of wheat stalks settling under weight, softer compressions of oat straw finding permanent positions, and the faint release of botanical fragrances as dried herbs respond to body heat and pressure. The aromatic properties of the prairie plants incorporated into their mattress create an olfactory environment that connects the couple to the landscape that surrounds their homestead. The wild mint provides subtle freshness that masks the earthier odors that accumulate in any organic bedding material, while the artemisia contributes the distinctive scent that many prairie families associate with home comfort and security. The sweetgrass, with its gentle fragrance and cultural associations with blessing and protection, adds spiritual dimensions to the purely practical aspects of sleep support. Lars's adjustment to his individual mattress reflects his transitional status between childhood and approaching manhood. At 16, he possesses the physical size and strength that require substantial bedding support. Yet his emotional and social development still benefits from the security of family proximity and parental guidance. His sleeping arrangements provide privacy, appropriate to his developing maturity, while maintaining his integration into the family unit that defines his identity and social position. The knowledge Lars gains through participating in mattress construction and experiencing the results of his family's domestic production provides essential education for his future role as head of his own household. His understanding of the relationship between material quality, construction techniques, and sleeping comfort will serve him when he establishes his own homestead and assumes responsibility for creating domestic arrangements that support family welfare and productivity. Anna's experience with the family's bedding, construction, and use represents crucial preparation for her future role as a prairie farm wife. Her participation in every aspect of the project, from material selection and preparation through construction techniques and final installation, provides practical education that formal schooling cannot offer. The knowledge she gains about resource management, seasonal planning, and domestic production will enable her to maintain household comfort and family health in the challenging environment of frontier life. The younger children's adaptation to their new bedding reflects both their individual personalities and their gradual integration into the family cooperation that enables successful homestead operation. Niels and Ole, sharing sleeping arrangements that require negotiation and compromise, learn through daily experience the social skills that will serve them throughout their lives. Young Kara's individual sleeping space provides her with security and comfort while teaching her personal responsibility for maintaining and caring for household resources. Little Astrid's transition to her new mattress represents her continued development within the protective environment that her family's domestic competence provides. Her small bed, positioned in her parents' room where nighttime needs can be attended without disturbing the entire household, reflects both practical childcare considerations and the emotional bonds that sustain family unity through the challenges of isolated frontier life. The maintenance routines that the family establishes for their new bedding reflect both practical necessity and accumulated wisdom about preserving domestic resources in environments that offer limited opportunities for replacement or repair. Ingrid develops schedules for periodic mattress inspection, checking for areas where straw has compressed excessively or shifted to create uncomfortable lumps. When problems develop, she employs techniques learned through years of experience to redistribute contents and restore optimal sleeping support. The winter challenges of maintaining straw bedding in a prairie farmhouse require adaptations to the extreme weather conditions that characterize Great Plains climate. The house's heating system, consisting of a wood-burning stove in the kitchen and a smaller stove in the main room, provides warmth that barely extends to the bedrooms where the family spends their sleeping hours. The straw mattresses must provide insulation that supplements the minimal artificial heating, while remaining comfortable despite the temperature variations that occur throughout winter nights. The management of moisture and humidity in the closed environment of a heated house during winter months requires careful attention to ventilation and air circulation. Ingrid monitors the mattresses for signs of moisture accumulation that might encourage mold or mildew development, opening windows for brief periods during favorable weather to provide air exchange that maintains bedding freshness without compromising. Indoor temperature control, the social aspects of family sleeping arrangements during prairie winters reflect both the practical necessities of shared warmth and the emotional bonds that sustain family unity. During months of indoor confinement, the children's willingness to share beds and coordinate their sleeping schedules demonstrates understanding of collective responsibility and mutual consideration that enable families to maintain harmony despite the stress of limited space and restricted outdoor activities. The economic implications of successful bedding construction become particularly evident during winter months, when the family's domestic comfort depends entirely on preparations made during more favorable seasons. Their ability to achieve restful sleep on bedding created from their own agricultural production enables them to maintain health and productivity that supports continued farm operation and family welfare. The cultural significance of the families. Bedding construction extends beyond immediate, practical benefits to encompass questions of identity and continuity in rapidly changing American society. The Anderson family's maintenance of traditional domestic production methods connects them to Norwegian heritage while demonstrating successful adaptation to American frontier conditions. Their synthesis of Old World knowledge and New World materials creates household practices that preserve cultural identity while enabling practical success in their adopted homeland. The seasonal cycle of bedding construction and use provides structure and meaning that connects the family to natural rhythms and agricultural processes that govern their lives. The annual preparation ritual creates anticipation and satisfaction that pure commercial purchase cannot provide, while the months of use demonstrate the long-term benefits of careful planning and skilled domestic production. The children's education through participation in traditional domestic arts provides them with knowledge and capabilities that formal schooling cannot offer. Their understanding of material properties, construction techniques, and resource management will serve them throughout their lives, whether they remain in agricultural communities or adapt these skills to other environments and occupations. As winter deepens and the Anderson family settles into the domestic routines that their carefully constructed bedding supports, the success of their annual preparation becomes evident in their ability to maintain comfort, health, and family harmony. Despite the challenging conditions that characterize prairie winter life, the straw mattresses provide not only physical support for restful sleep, but also psychological security that comes from successfully managing the complex relationship between human needs and sneeze and natural resources, the sounds of the family settling into sleep on their fresh straw bedding, the gentle rustling of plant materials, the satisfied sighs of bodies finding comfortable positions, and the quiet conversations that occur between parents and children during the transition from waking to sleeping create an acoustic environment that reflects both domestic tranquility and successful adaptation to frontier conditions. But as you observe, the Anderson family adapting to another winter season supported by seat bedding they created through their own knowledge and labor. The fundamental question that emerges transcends their immediate circumstances to encompass broader issues about the relationship between self-sufficiency and human satisfaction. In our contemporary world of commercial convenience and manufactured comfort, what essential elements of security, family cooperation, and connection to natural materials have we lost by abandoning the domestic production methods that enabled previous generations to create the foundations of comfort through their own capabilities? And what wisdom about seasonal preparation, resource management, and family cooperation might we recover by understanding the domestic arts that sustained our ancestors through the challenges of creating homes in demanding environments? The Anderson family's story represents not merely the end of an era in American domestic life, but also a repository of knowledge and values that contemporary families might find valuable as they navigate modern challenges of economic uncertainty, environmental sustainability, and family cohesion. Their ability to create comfort and security through their own knowledge and labor offers lessons that transcend the specific techniques of straw mattress construction to encompass broader principles of self-reliance, family cooperation, and harmonious relationship with the natural world that provides the raw materials for human comfort and survival.